And none of those people coming from Central and South America or elsewhere, they haven't done anything for this country. They haven't bled for this country. They haven't fought for our principles. But our Afghan partners who served alongside our military men and women, our special forces, our SEALs, our Green Berets, our Rangers, our MARSOC Raiders, they have fought and served alongside us for these principles that most Americans don't even understand anymore. I mean, freedom of expression, Bill of Rights. I mean, these people are desperate for this. And these men and women in Afghanistan went above and beyond. And that's why we have a moral imperative to honor our promise we made to them. And our nation made this promise. Our politicians, our presidents, our general officers made these promises. And they need to do a better job, because what was on display the last 2 weeks made me, frankly, ashamed of being an American.
Here's the deal, I mean, with your audience, and with your credentials, you need to really force the issue of the Afghanistan withdrawal investigation. I think that is so damn important, because the only person that was held accountable was Stu Schiller. That's the only person. The rest of them got away with it, and right or wrong, whatever Stu did, but he's just calling for accountability. And we owe it to the 13 service members' families, so they get the answer what the hell happened. We owe it to the 40 wounded.
Colonel Asad Genghis Khan, USMC. It's an honor to have you on. Welcome to the Lion's Den with Armed Forces Press. My name is Commander Dan O'Shea, a retired Navy SEAL, and today I'm having my first book review, if you will, about Colonel Asad's, Colonel Khan's book, Betrayal of Command. And I went through it this week, and now I have the author. And Asad, honored to have you on board. And please introduce yourself to the Lion's Den, please.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure to be on your show. And as background for myself, I was born in Pakistan, and my family immigrated to the United States in 1970 because of political turmoil in the country. And so it just so happened that we were refugees, believe it or not, from Pakistan into Afghanistan. And then we spent some time in Tehran, during the Shah's time. And following that, we went to England, spent some time in Spain, and then ended up in West Hartford, Connecticut. I went to school in West Hartford, went to school up in college up in Boston, Mass, Wellesley, to be precise. And then from there, I decided to go in the Marine Corps. And, I loved it. So I went through the Marine Corps officer candidate school, went through TBS, the normal stuff. And then got assigned to 1st Battalion, 7th Marines as a platoon commander. Loved every bit of the infantry lifestyle. I was very fortunate. I got augmented into the infantry MOS, because back then the Marine Corps just gave you a reserve commission. So I kept my infantry MOS. Then I went down to the Marine Recruit Depot in San Diego and, did about 3.5 years there, about 15 cycles, which I believe is still the record for an officer, and pumped through about 5,000 recruits. But, my claim to fame down there really is, I never lost a drill instructor. And the main reason I didn't lose a drill instructor was because, I built trust in them, and I wasn't into this, snooping around and looking for them to screw up. I was just always visible. And my view was, if I was always around, and they saw an officer around, they're not going to do anything stupid. And, and they required leadership as well. So after the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, went to the Amphibious Warfare School. After that, went to Saudi Arabia and served as an advisor to the Royal Saudi Marine Forces, and then came back and was a company commander at 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, and then moved up to be the battalion operations officer, battalion executive officer. And after that, I went to the Naval War College, which I absolutely loved because, but I was a knuckle dragger. So I'd take an English course and learn how to write again and whatnot. And then after the Naval War College, there was a 2nd-year program. And one day I'm working out in the gym, and this colonel comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, Genghis, are you applying for the 2nd-year program?" I'm like, "What are you talking about, sir? I'm barely making it through the school." And he's like, "Listen, don't sell yourself short. If you don't apply, you're making somebody else's chances greater to get accepted, and you're just as good as anybody else." So I said, "What the hell? I'll throw in an application." I threw it in, and believe it or not, I was the only one selected from the Naval War College. And the reason being was they said, and the board, when they asked me, "Why do you want to go to the School of Advanced Warfighting?" And my response was quite simply, because I knew they needed planners to come out of there to get back down to the Marine Expeditionary Force staff. So my view was I'd get back to the operating forces, and that's the answer I gave them. And so they were kind of shocked. They said, "Everybody else wants to go on the joint staff and or be a general's aide." I said, "Well, I can't speak on their behalf, sir. I'm just telling you what I want to do." And I was the one selected. So I went down to the School of Advanced Warfighting, loved it, did that for a year down in Quantico. And then I didn't get to the MEF, unfortunately. I ended up at the MACTAF staff training program. It really upped my game. It made me smarter, gave me great exposure to the Marine Corps across all the 3 MEFs. And also, it made me a better instructor because I had to teach MACTAF operations. And then we had a great director there by the name of Colonel Dobson. This guy is a wizard, and he's a taskmaster too. I loved him. And one day he called me into his office. He's like, "Hey, Genghis, get in here. I want you to," he throws this bunch of stack of papers. He says, "I want you to finish this publication and doctrinal publication and get it printed." And I looked at it. I said, "Sir, you got the wrong guy. I'm not the right guy. There's a bunch of other guys here much smarter." He said, "No, you're the right guy. You'll get it done." So, and they basically give you a team of contractors. And so I helped co-author the Marine Corps planning process doctrinal pub. And, within 3 months, we got it done. And the majority of us was written. And so I was pretty excited, "Hey, good job." And then he called me back in. He said, "Nah, you got that done. Now I want you to write Marine Corps operations," which was basically a blank piece of paper. And I'm like, "You got to be shitting me, sir. Give it to somebody else." He's like, "No, you got 3 months. Get it done." And we got it done. So, I was very fortunate to be part of the Marine Corps planning process, Marine Corps operations. And while I was at the MACTAF staff training program, I was also doing counter-narcotics work with the Coalition of Special Warfare. And we'd go out to Pakistan, because there's a lot of drugs coming through Pakistan and Afghanistan to help the Pakistanis sort of deal with that drug flow. So I was exposed to Pakistan quite a bit, aside from being there. And I was also a foreign area officer for Middle East and South Asia at the time.
And let me ask, you maintained
sure.
your proficiency in Pashtun, correct?
Yes.
Is that was that as it growing up, and then because it's hard to maintain that proficiency, once you get into America, because you started school in America, it sounds like pretty young. I saw on some of the podcasts. Your first
I was like 9, 10 years old. I mean, the problem is you got to be able to think in the language, right? So when you talk about proficiency, I couldn't think in the language, but if you give me 2, 3, 4 weeks in an environment and you start thinking in that language, right? I mean, I can speak, few languages proficiently, but I really have to focus on, once I start thinking in it, then I'm a native speaker then, right? So that was a big thing. And while I was at MACTAF staff training program, I got selected for battalion command at 2nd Marine Division. So I went down to 2nd Marine Division, because of my plans background and doctrinal background, they made me the G3 plans officer. So I was locked up in a vault, servicing all these operational plans that you have to, and this, TIDFIDs and all that stuff. You have to keep them updated. And then 9/11 happened. And, my gunny comes running in. He's like, "Hey, sir, turn on the TV." And, I didn't have time for TV. I was like, "Gunny, get out of here. I got work to do." He's like, no, sir, turn it on. And, I obviously saw the airplanes. And I knew right there and then my life is about to fundamentally change. And sure as
did you assume it was Al-Qaeda when it happened?
The first plane, I didn't. The second one, I knew it was the jihadists because I've written a paper on jihadism at the Naval War College. So I was tracking a lot of this stuff, from 1995 timeframe. And and they'd said that they were going to attack the United States. And in my view, when somebody says something, you got to believe them. It's really that simple. So when that happened, a couple of days later, I got orders down to get down to Tampa. And believe it or not, I told my gunny, I said, "Hey, gunny, get my travel arrangements done." He's like, so he had me going to like Texas, to like, up to Chicago, back down to Tampa. I mean, it was just the circuitous route. And I was like, "Gunny, you got to be shitting me, man. I'm not flying all over the damn country." And he's a little frustrated too. So he looked at me. He's like, "Sir, I'll try, but the way you look, I don't even know if I can get you on an airplane."
Yeah. No,
and then he's kind of shocked, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." I said, "Gunny, I got no issue with that. I'll just drive down there. So I drove down to Tampa.
By the way, just out of curiosity, how many Muslims officers were in the Marine Corps at the time? I mean, what was the percentage?
It's probably low, probably less than 1%. Out of the Marine officers, very low. I mean, I didn't ask anybody what your religion is. I mean, we don't go down that road as military personnel. But frankly, I didn't know anybody. I'd met one Marine that was a Muslim, and during Ramadan, he was trying to skate, didn't want to go to training. He was in a sister company when I was in 1-2. So the company commanders asked me, which I said, "Send his ass to me." So he came to me, and I lit into him. I said, "Let me tell you something. The whole part of Ramadan is you do your normal stuff. And you're trying to scam. So, don't play this crap with me." He's like, "Well, sir," I said, "I'm a Muslim, man, and I'm out here training. Get your ass over there before I throw your ass in the brig." He understood. He knew you couldn't, hide and slide.
Well, as someone who went to Ranger School, I know about having to fast and still have to carry a 60-pound rucksack for 22 hours a day. They don't care, and I know I looked at your record. Ranger School sounds like the only thing you didn't do in your career, but I mean, you can operate on not a lot of food when need to, because sometimes it's just the reality of the combat situation you're in.
I agree with you. I mean, 100%. I mean, I think the closest I went to Ranger School was probably the infantry officers course, which is pretty rugged, in those days. And we were the winter class, so I mean, it was an ass kicker, quite frankly. And I had people. I had one officer begging me to kill him during the course. And I was like, "I'm not going to kill you, man," because so I just went over and we hugged each other just to stay warm, shivering.
I was frankly colder in Ranger School. I went from Bahrain. I was deployed to Bahrain with SEAL Team 3.
All right.
December 7th, 1993. Remember the date because it's Pearl Harbor. Orders came across the command and said, "Lieutenant J.G. O'Shea, report to Ranger School 1 January." And I go from 90 degrees in the Middle East to 13 degrees at Fort Benning, and we froze our ass off, and I went straight through. But Hell Week, nothing's like Hell Week. But I was, as a whole, much more miserable in Dahlonega, the swamps of northern Florida, and I froze my ass off. So yeah, there's nothing like going through IOBC or Benning or anything in January.
Yeah,
it just sucks.
Yeah. It's cold, it weakens you. So, so it just so happens. So I get down to CENTCOM, and I meet, I get thrown in plans and ops, and we commence the planning. And from there, so I'm there briefing the plan. And in fact, everything was just chaotic. And I don't want to take too many names because there's some great people, like at the time, Colonel Halverson, who retired as a lieutenant general, fantastic human being. I mean, yep. God bless, I just love the man. And he gave me, we didn't have computers for everybody, so he gave me a laptop, and he said, "Hey, that's the president's briefing laptop. Don't mess it up." And I thought he was joking, until I flipped it open, and sure as hell it was. I was like, Jesus, man. But anyway, so the first brief to the Council of Generals, I went to brief it, and it's supposed to be 45 minutes, and I'm 2.5 hours into this brief because every colonel, every general's got to make a comment, and some of the comments were just plain stupid in my view. Ideas like, "Hey, let's throw Korans out of the back of airplanes to show the people," and I'm just sitting there going, "That's not a good idea, sir, because the Quran is a scripture, a holy book. And you don't want to throw it on the ground. It's just disrespects it." And so at the end, the general at the time was a deputy Sink, was General Rifle DeLong, a Marine. And, so, we went after 2.5 hours into the brief. He goes to me. So he goes, so what do you think, Genghis? So I said, sir, we're going to go through the Taliban. They're not like the old Mujahideen. These guys are scholars. They're, academics. They're school teachers. That's what Talib is, teacher, student.
Right.
And but I said in the process, if we lose Pakistan, I said, World Trade Center is going to be an afterthought. And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? I said, Pakistan's got strategic weapons. And if they fall in the wrong hands, these guys will use them. And he's like, you're talking Armageddon, Colonel. I said, I was leaning on the podium, a little flippant. And I said, your words, not mine, General. And he went literally berserk on me. He threw me out of the room. And I went down to my little cell, my planning cell, and I'm picking up my shit because I figured I got fired and I'm going to go back to Lejeune. I got a battalion waiting for me. I'm fine. And my 1-star comes running down. He's like, where are you going? I said, sir, I'm going back to Lejeune. He threw me out. He fired me. And because he wanted some the Jedi Knights. He said, get me some Jedi Knights up here. He didn't realize my background. Not only was I a Jedi Knight, but I wrote the damn doctrinal books on this stuff. And so he said, no. He said he just got frustrated. He wants to see you. So I went up to his to his office, and he's like, get in here. It's like, he goes, I want you to go over there. I'm like, go where, sir? He says, I don't know, just get over to Pakistan and figure. I said, do what, sir? He said, I don't, just figure it out. He's frustrated. He goes, be my eyes and ears. I'm like, roger that, sir. So I hop on a plane, and I took a grab, and then the Colonel Tampone was the chief of staff of Marsh Sent at the time, and he said, hey, he gave me some comms equipment. He said, take this with you because you don't know where you're gonna end up. And so I throw that in a backpack, and obviously I can't, I have to keep it on my body. And I got on a airplane from Dulles. I drove up to Quantico, where my family was, see them, and then I went to Dulles, flew to London, England, and got on a PIA flight. And the deal, man. We're all, I get to the PIA counter. There's a line about 200 people trying to get on that damn plane. And they want 10 pounds from me for some extra insurance fee. I don't have any pounds. I got nothing. So I gave him a $20 bill. I said, here. He goes, we don't take dollars. And then I'm thinking, he said, there's a money exchange. It's way down in the terminal hall. So I'm thinking, shit, man, if I go all the way down there, I'm going to lose my spot in the line. So I turned around to the guy. I said, hey, you give me 10 pounds for 20? He's like, yeah, sure, behind me. Anyway, I get on the plane, and I land in Islamabad, and there's no embassy vehicle. Because I'd been there so many times, the Suburbans would show up. Nobody shows up, so I'm thinking, now what do I do? So I get in a cab, and I tell the cabbie that I didn't want to tell him I want to go to the U.S. Embassy because, everybody's amped up. So I said, take me to Serena Hotel. I know where that was in Islamabad. And we get to Serena Hotel. I said, take a right, take a left, take a right, take a left. We get to a police checkpoint. I hop out, pay him, and I get to the embassy gates. And there's a bunch of other military people there. Some had gotten stuck. Some were sent. Some were put on a delegation. And, so we all met in the downstairs in a room. And we started a CENTCOM LNO cell. And basically establish all the air corridors going through Pakistan. And what people don't realize, and I didn't either at the time, is, when you start bombing, you need CSAR capability, combat search and rescue. And to have CSAR capability, to payloads and those helicopters, they got to be based close by, in close proximity to be able to rescue the pilot. And so we had to establish all the basing in Pakistan. And then we knew when the bombing was going to start, everybody was going to come across the border into Pakistan. So we had to set up a screen line. And at one time, we had about 65,000 Pakistani troops. Now, think about this, along the western border. Now, Pakistan on the east is, always button heads with India. So they're really focused eastward. And we had to ask them to move some forces to the western border, which was a huge step on their part. And they did. And then the winters came and they didn't have the winter gear. So then we had to arrange for that, because some of these altitudes, 14 to 18,000 feet. So anyway, so the screen line was catching people, right? And our mandate was to catch all the foreigners. We didn't care about the Pakistanis. We didn't care about the Afghans, but especially, Arab speakers and whatnot. And so they got them by the hundreds at that time. And then we had to rendition them. So we started the first rendition program in 2001, and they were sent off, because Pakistanis couldn't hold them any longer. They're like, hey, this is just too much. So we started taking them out. out of Pakistan.
Well, you were instrumental in setting up and building those relationships with the generals, with the Pakistani generals and senior leadership. And I kind of want to go into the, Pashtun culture that I think you were probably uniquely qualified to understand, that and having to build and getting access to those bases. That all had to be negotiated. And it sounds like, you were taking the lead, for the embassy, probably as much due as that's to your language, but even more so your cultural understanding of who we were dealing with and the requirements back and forth between Pakistan and the U.S. Can you share some of that?
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't come on here to plug my book, but in the first chapter of my book, I talk about my ancestors. And just a quick segue: when the book went to the publishers, they said the first chapter is not relevant, and I said it's very relevant. It's who I am. It's who my ancestors are. So they said, why don't you put it in the back as an annex? I said, no, it's going to stay right in the front. That's how the book's going to start, and because that's my DNA. And I realized very quickly they were interested in making money, because they made a statement, well, it's not going to appeal to a wider audience. And I said, I don't care about a wider audience. I'm telling a story. And I realized that we had divergent goals. And so I ended up ending the relationship with them over my ancestors. So in our culture, your ancestors mean everything. And in the Pashtunwali code, it is not any dissimilar, or it's not a really unique code. If you try, and you've traveled a great deal, most countries and most cultures respect their elders. That's the first part, the jirga, right? So you got to respect your elders. Your word is your bond. I mean, we even in the military, your word's your bond. I mean, that's the way we're brought up, right? And you gotta show hospitality, be humble, right? And then there's that thing, badla, of revenge. If somebody does you wrong, now in those days, you got to remember, in the West, we have laws and police and all that stuff that you can go file a complaint. But in a lot of these remote areas, you don't have that. And so it comes down to the jirga basically sitting down and saying, either who's right or who's wrong. And if somebody murders your family member, and I don't care how many generations it goes, but that revenge will happen. And I know in so many cases where subsequent generations have taken their revenge out. And that's how this anonymity starts, and the feuds start between these cultures. Now, you've been to Afghanistan, and you know how remote these villages are. There's no police. There's no central government. There's no provincial government. There's no district government. And so the code is basically over 5,000 years old. I mean, it goes back as, the same code in the Bible, Leviticus. I mean, it's the same thing.
Well, it's for me as Irish, it's like the Hatfields and McCoys. So I can understand it from, an Irish Celtic understanding, but there was one comment about, oh man, now I was on the tip of my tongue. I'll get it back, but it's really important. Oh no, this is where I wanted to ask you. I think that's what drew you to the Marines more than any of the other services. And you described early on in your career the mentorship you got from the Vietnam era generation of leaders that really had that Semper Fi, total warrior ethos. But then you, even in your time, because you were just a few years ahead of me, not everyone in the Marine Corps played by those rules, and you saw that even early on in your career about comparing. And that's what my question is: compare the Pashtun warrior ethos towards like what the Marine Corps lives and breathes, but doesn't always live up to that standard. Because like I said, the Vietnam generals, it sounded like those were the generals that kind of laid the framework for the Marine Corps, for your perspective, what the Marines are supposed to be about. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, I glossed over my time when I checked into 1st Battalion, 7th Marines as a young second lieutenant. And when you go to the regimental headquarters, you go through the S1, the admin, you go see the regimental XO, and eventually the regimental commander wants to see you. And my regimental commander is Jay Vargas. Jay Vargas is Medal of Honor recipient. I mean, I've heard stories about this man. I'm standing at attention in front of him, and it's like maybe 2 or 3 notches below God, for a young lieutenant. And what really motivated me about him and the example that he set, he was so humble, but he was steely-eyed. And then I'd see him out there as a full bird colonel PTing every day, walking around doing, leading by example. And that motivated me. I report down to 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, make my way through the XO, and he tells me, you're going to meet the battalion commander at 1200 in front of the pull-up bars, right? And the word was out, so battalion commander was a kick-ass runner. I love the man, Colonel Simone, took me on a run. My lungs are coming out of my nose, but fortunately, I could hang with them. And that's what determined if you went down to a line platoon or you went to a staff job. And so it was a meat eater's, world in those days. And, legends like Colonel John Ripley, the bridge at Dong Ha. I mean, these guys are absolute legends in our Marine Corps. And there were men of honor. There were men of discipline, and there were men of example. I emulated them, And
as you know, Ripley just after such an injustice, he's finally getting the Medal of Honor. Almost 50 years too late. But I don't know how that took so long. Because that bridge at Dong Ha is at the Naval Academy, like a sand table of it, if you will, and it's in a memorial hall. And I tell you, I get back to Annapolis, and the only place I probably go visit is Memorial Hall, and I always make a moment to go up and see the John Ripley dedication. It's good to finally see that corrected after many, many years.
Yeah, I happen to know his son, who's also a Marine, and we just communicated last week when that announcement came out. And imagine somebody like Colonel Ripley standing in front of you. Right? You want to be that man. And what happened was in the 90s, the Marine Corps took a left turn somewhere. And we can talk about that later on, where instead of these guys, they're, General Rawlins, who had the world sit-up record at one time. These guys are just meat eaters. They're just beasts, and you wanted to be them. Then you see these guys, other guys just carrying around with a stack of books, very smart guys. 1,000-pound brains, but their bodies couldn't get them from here. You got to be able to carry that brain from point A to point B. And unfortunately, that's what happened in the Marine Corps. And in my view, and we could talk about that when we talk, go into details of Afghanistan. So I ended up in Pakistan. We set up all those bases and stuff. We did that. Then I went into Afghanistan. One day the ambassador called me and she said, I need you to get into Kabul. So I said, to do what, ma'am? And she's a tough lady. She's a Marine colonel's daughter. She said, to open the embassy. And I asked her, I said, ma'am, how do you open an embassy? And she looked over her glasses. She said, you're a Marine colonel, figure it out. And I was like, yes, ma'am, I got it. So I went down and saw the RSO. He said, hey, she's giving you a blank check, use it. And, so we got some Marines up to Bagram, met up in the middle of the night. And I took in a group of these civilians who were supposed to go in with me. And the day I met them, this is like 2 days before we're flying from Islamabad to Bagram, I go in the conference room, and the average age had to be 70 of this group. And I'm just walking there. I'm like, oh, my God. So I was like, how many of y'all got cold weather gear? None. How many brought sleeping bags? None. So I sent somebody out to the local market. Go get me some jackets and sleeping bags and stuff. And we pile in. We took an MSD counter assault team with us. From the State Department, and we land in Bagram in the middle of the night. I put them up in a bombed hangar. Next morning, link up with a special forces team, and they've got a bus locked down, a couple of buses, and we're supposed to drive down to Kabul. And typical Marines, you got to love them. I love Marine gunnery sergeants, right? And every Marine they came off the ships. Every Marine had a fresh haircut because they're going to combat, right? But I'm walking past the bus, getting my head cons and stuff, and all I'm seeing is these Marines with, fresh haircuts. And I'm thinking, Jesus, man, we stick out like a sore thumb. So I told staff NCOs, I said, hey, put up some, cover the windows so we don't look like targets. And I'll never forget a young lieutenant comes up to me, and we're literally, we're just moving, keep momentum. He's like, sir, what am I supposed to do if the driver does something, unsafe? So I said, listen, Lieutenant, I have no idea. Just keep your pistol in your lap, sit behind him. If you don't like what he's doing something, do what you think is the right decision. Make it. And so we take off, and it was a really funny story because all the bridges are blown, and there's a fording site in the river. On the other side is a tank sitting there. and an old Russian Soviet tank. So I hop out. I used to always go have cartons of cigarettes. So I grab a carton of cigarette. I walk out to the tank, and Afghan pops up, and he's like, "Assalamu alaikum." I said, "Hey, can we pass here?" He goes, "Yeah, you can pass here, but you got to pay me." I said, "Pay you for what?" He said, "This is my fording site." So I said, "What am I paying you for? We're going to go across." He said, "No, you got to pay." I said, "Listen, I'm not paying you anything. I'll give you a choice. I'm either going to give you one magazine from this rifle, or I'm going to give you 2 magazines. You take your pick. But as soon as I start shooting, everybody behind me is going to shoot and get 2 busloads of Marines." He's like, "Come on, man. I'm just a poor guy. And this is no BS, Dan." I said, "Okay, what do you need?" And he goes, "Give me your boots." I looked down because I'm looking up at him. I looked down his feet. This dead of freaking winter. He's got no shoes.
Yeah, of course.
Standing on a steel tank. And I was like, I'm not going to give you my boots, but I'll tell you what, when I come back, I'll bring you some shoes. No worries. You got to trust me. And I did later on. We found some boxes of Korean boots in the commissary's warehouse. And I brought them back and I gave them to him. Nonetheless, so we opened the embassy, and then I got sent off. I ran into Vinny Colonies and General Harrell, and also Jawbreaker, a gentleman.
I know Gary.
Yeah.
Gary Bernstein
Yep.
lives actually here in Tampa, and we've
okay.
we've actually been in the green room we were both doing interviews within 30 minutes of each other, and so I've spoken with Gary a handful of times, and yeah, what a that guy's got a lot of stories. I'm gonna have to get him on a future podcast for sure.
He's unbelievable.
It's, you go ahead. I don't want to steal your thunder because very interesting. You met him for the first time, obviously. What, the Serena? We got the Ariana or the Serena? The hotel?
No, I met him at the embassy. So so what we did, we locked down the embassy. I told the Marines, nobody comes in, nobody goes out, right? And then the National Alliance guys or the Northern Alliance guys show up, and they're like, "You're not supposed to be here." I'm like, well, "What do you mean we're not supposed to be here?" "Well, there's a bond agreement. There's no foreign forces allowed in Kabul." So I said, "We're here." So he said, "Well, you got to leave." I said, "We're not leaving. This is U.S. property. I'm not going anywhere." So he said, "Take your uniforms off." I said, "I'm not taking my uniforms off. You got to kill me first, And so we're going back and forth, and they're like, "Okay, can you cover him up?" So I said, "Yeah, I can cover him up. That's fair. I'll meet you halfway." So if you remember, we had the black sleeves, the fleece things. Remember those?
Right. Yep.
Well, the Marines, I said, "Put the fleeces on," and some stupid CNN cameraman took pictures of it, and it got on the news. And it was FMF PAC called me on my Inmarsat that Colonel Tempone had given me and just ripped my lips off. "Who the hell are you? Change Marine Corps uniform rigs, blah, blah, blah." And he wouldn't even let me get a sentence out, try to explain. And finally, I just got tired of getting my ass chewed. I was like, "Sir, you're breaking up." And I just hung up on him. And I was like, screwed. And later on, I met the general, really good guy. Really good guy. And,
when you met Gary, did you run across a guy named Brian? Did you run across a Brian, his staff?
I'm sure I did because I hung out with him for a bit.
Yeah.
But here's the story with Gary. So the embassy's locked down, the old compound, right? And all of a sudden, there's somebody out at the gate that wants to come in. The Marines are like, no. And, back and forth. And finally, the Marines call me. He's like, "Hey, sir, there's somebody out here just harassing us. He wants to come in." So I go out there, and some guy standing there, he's like, "Hey, can I talk to you down the fence line?" So I'm like, "Sure." I said, "But you're not coming in, so we can talk down there." So we go down there, and he's like, "You got to let me in." I'm like, "Nobody's allowed in here. You're not getting it." He goes, "I'm with the agency." So I said, "I'm a freaking astronaut." I said, "How the hell do I know you're with the agency? You got an ID card or anything?" Because "You think I'm carrying an ID card being with the agency?" So I said, "Tell you what, give me your name. I'll call back to Islamabad and, I'll verify you." He gives me his name. He's legit. So he comes in, and what he's looking for is I happen to have the senior diplomat in country at the time. And the senior diplomat was the State Department's maintenance facilities undersecretary, whatever, this old, elder lady. And she's in a bunker. And so he's like, "Hey, we need this lady to get up to Bagram because Karzai is coming in, and we need some, political diplomatic representatives up there." So I'm like, "You're joking, right?" So all I'm thinking in my mind, I got to drive all that road up there. But then I'm thinking, that tank guy, I owe him a set of boots. So we go down and talk to this lady, and she's all excited. That's our 15 minutes of fame. So I'm like, okay, if she wants to do it, do it. So we, get our counter assault team, and we load up, and we get, I come to the same boarding site, and the guy hops out. He's like, hey, did you bring me anything? I go, I told you I would, I said, go in the back, there's a box there. So he pulls out a pair of boots. He's like, hey, thank you very much. You're a man of honor, So I said, take the whole box, man. Take it all. There's like probably a dozen pairs, old boots. And he's really excited. He's, a wealthy man now. And so we go there, and we end up at, there's a tent set up where they're doing for aircraft control, tax or something. And so, they had a like a wooden chair. So I put this lady in there, and I gave her a poncho liner. I said, ma'am, you get some rest, and I'll come get you when Karzai's plane lands. So I checked with this young radio operator. I say, what time's Karzai's plane coming in? And he's like, 2200, sir. So at 2000, I check with him again. Hey, we're still good? He's like, coming up at midnight, sir. I'm like, okay. So 2200, I go and check on the plane. And there's a new kid out there on watch. So I'm like, what time's Karzai's plane coming in? He's like, sir, the plane's come and gone. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. Really? So I said, that guy before you told me. He said, that guy is a clown. And I'm like, man. And I was always taught, that bad news doesn't get good with time. So I went, and this lady's asleep in her chair. And I said, ma'am, get up. I said, she's like, hey, is Karzai here? I said, no, ma'am. Yeah, we messed up. He's come and gone. She jumps out of the chair, and she starts hopping up and down. I want to see Karzai. I want to see Karzai. And I'm just standing there going, holy shit. Nobody's trained me how to deal with this one, And while I'm trying to figure out how to, subside a tantrum, somebody in the back goes, will you shut the F up? I'm trying to sleep. There's some special forces guy back there. And I had to bite my tongue because I don't want to laugh in front of her. I go outside, and I'm just dying, and she calmed down. And then General Harrell sees me and sends me off. I don't know if you want to hear more about this.
Well, you can wrap that story up. I mean, I can only imagine how upset, because her 15 minutes of fame went out the door. And I mean, I guess it's about an hour drive, as I recall, from Bagram down up to.
It took us longer because there's no roads in those days, right? Everything got bombed. Yeah. No, but with Harold sent me off on some other missions, right? And so I ended up all over the place throughout Afghanistan with a bunch of ODAs, with the Seabist and whatnot. Yeah. Then I made my way back to Pakistan, and then we had some issues there, and then it was time for me to come home. Basically.
Yeah, well, I want you to share your reception at CENTCOM. You've been on the ground, you had firsthand experience, and it sounds like the people who didn't understand the war were too busy to listen to someone who had ground truth. And I had similar experiences dealing with that kind of stuff with working kidnappers at the embassy for 2 years. But but I really want to get into kind of the meat of how your leadership and mindset took over 1-6 and kind of go on that. So wrap yourself up and come home from the war, and then let's roll.
Yeah, so
you're getting command. You're getting your first
command.
Yeah,
so I come home. I obviously go down to CENTCOM to check out and get outbriefed and all that stuff. And nobody wanted to talk to me. Not a single person, except for Colonel Tampone. I mean, hats off to him. I mean, I sat outside people's offices for hours. And finally I said, you know what, screw this. I'm not anybody's lackey. I'm out of here. And I went back, told Colonel Tampone. And the reason being was this is probably around April, May timeframe of 2002. Everybody's focused on Iraq. Afghanistan's a done deal. I mean, we've literally, won in Afghanistan. We're done.
Well, I can tell you, I was a staff officer there. And I can tell you right now, after Anaconda went down, that was the post Anaconda brief. Literally, like the next day, Afghanistan was an afterthought. I mean, it was unbelievable, because Anaconda was like, the big mission, they're gonna, put the noose around Osama bin Laden, which of course did not happen.
Yep.
But the whole lift and shift of the command headquarters went immediately to Iraq, and it, we can talk about. And I'd be curious in your perspective, and I guess, hell, I'll just ask it right now. Do you believe if we had taken and put 10% of what we invested into Iraq in terms of the billions and the troops and the commitment, had we just stayed focused on Afghanistan and then finished the battle and rebuilt all the things we said we were going to do in Afghanistan, like rebuild the ring road, rebuild Conversation, had we put 10% of what we squandered in Iraq, do you think if we had all stayed focused in Afghanistan and done maybe a 5 to 10 year plan, do you think ultimately we could have been successful in Afghanistan had we not lifted and shifted our focus? Just out of curiosity.
No.
Hmm.
The corruption was just too much, too rampant on all sides, on the U.S. side, on the Afghan side, and on the neighboring countries' side. We got to keep that in mind. And, the more importantly, I think by going into Afghanistan was the wrong move. I never supported that. When I was working at the embassy, and I remember, it was 15 million or 5 million. We bumped it up to 15 million and then 20 million or something. But the issue was I'm sitting there in the bubble, when we're having these discussions, all I'm thinking is if bin Laden truly is a billionaire's son and he's got access to funds, family funds or through these zakat funds where people are donating, right?
Right.
He can trump 15 million. If I was to capture him, and I know I'm getting 15 million, he'd say, "Hey, I'll give you 30 million. Let me go." Right. So I proposed, put $1 billion on his head, and people looked at me. And I remember one guy said, "Did you get enough sleep last night, Colonel?" You damn right I did. But you can't trump $1 billion, and somebody will invest 100 million to make the billion. And that's how those cultures work. And there's many cases that if you remember, there were some ladies that were rescued at the outset of, we threw money at it. That wasn't any Jipra big rescue. It was money and that's how things work. Right. And by some estimates, Mullah Omar was ready to give up bin Laden also. The deadline was till 11 October. We started bombing on the 7th. So we have a tendency to do this stuff. We give people deadlines in the middle of negotiations. We turn and we always, we do this 90-degree offset and we start bombing people rather than, taking. And I can guarantee you, if you get the right people to negotiate, you'll get results. And, in a lot of these cultures, they respect strength. They respect sense of honor. And when I used to negotiate on behalf of the United States, I'd be very straightforward with them. I'd take out my pistol out of respect, and nonchalantly I'd turn on my laser dot, right? And it's been pointing at the guy's thing, and I pretend I didn't see it. He sees it. Everybody around sees it. And I tell him, I said, "Hey, you got option A and option B, And as a Muslim brother, I'll tell you, the best thing, take option A. It's a good option. Take it. Because there's also an option C I can't talk to you about. We don't want to go there, And so you've built a level of trust. So it's done of sort of this. You have to build a trust when you're negotiating. You don't go in there full of hubris and all that stuff. And the guy's got to trust you, and they know that you're not going to lie to them, And I'll give you another example. If I can fast forward a little bit, I used to get all these grid coordinates to go find so and so at this grid coordinate. I went freaking batshit crazy running around Afghanistan. These grid coordinates, there's nobody there. So finally, I got so freaking fed up. I went back to Skiff, and I said, "Let me tell you something. You give me the freaking list of people you want, and I'm tired. I'm not running around for you anymore." Well, I said, "Well, you don't have the clearance. I got TSSCI." I said, "You read me into whatever freaking program you're in if you want me to do this. Otherwise, I'm not doing it. Don't call me anymore. I'm done running around." So finally, they gave me a list, and I'd go to their village. I'd literally knock on their door, right? And where's Mullah so-and-so? Well, he went off to Pakistan. Where's his kids at? They were standing right there. Where's his eldest son at? And if the kid was 14, 15, 16, 18 years old, I said, "Come with me." I wouldn't tie him up. I wouldn't do anything like that. I said, "Tell Mullah X, Y, and Z, I can take a name, Rosie Khan, to come see me." And I take the kid with me. He'd sit there, drink chai with me. I'd feed him. We'd sit around, shoot the breeze. And 2-3 days later, the mullah would show up. And I'd say, "You're a man of honor. I respect you. Grab a seat." And I'd give the son $100. I said, "Go on home." And it was done in a manner that was, it was, and I'd tell the mullah, I said, "Listen, bud, here's the bottom line. Your name's on some list. I don't know why it got on that list. I really don't care. I'm going to call in a helicopter. You're going to get on that helicopter, and they're going to fly to Bagram, and they'll question you. Just tell them the truth. That's all it is. If you've done something bad in your background, That's between you and them. I consider you a man of honor. That's all, and it was done without shutting down the entire village, without waking people up in the middle of the night, without flex cuffing everybody, and all that other stuff. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So there's different ways of doing things within that culture. And we just got to learn how to do it. That's my whole point. And getting back to your point about Afghanistan, I was never a big fan of this whole thing. It could have been resolved in a jerk-up, honest to God, because you have to understand how we think. But I think what happened was we got sort of wrapped up in the Northern Alliance mindset. You got to remember the reason Taliban came into power was because the Northern Alliance was harsher than the Taliban. They were in power at one time. And I went to the actual village where this incident happened in Miamdo, where young kids were raped, killed, and left outside. And Mullah Omar was a school teacher, and he went and saw this, and he's like, what the hell's going on here? He picked up some shovels and stuff and chased these Northern Alliance guys out of their village. And the next village called them and said, hey, we're having the same problem. They're doing this to our kids. And, that's how Taliban spread across Afghanistan. And, and I'm not certainly defending them by any sense of the word, because they're just as harsh, right? But that's all that country knows. It's one harsh regime after another, right?
Right.
And that's where they have to, basically minimize this friction and conflict between various villages, various tribes, and they learn to coexist. They've got very distinct boundaries. And then later on, when I was a battalion commander, they gave me Afghan National Army forces. I might as well take their freaking enemy with me. These guys
they're right. They were bringing in Uzbeks and Tajiks and whatnot from the north, right?
Yeah. And a few times I had villagers and my local militia tell me, you bring these guys, we're going to start a fight with them, and you're going to get caught in the middle.
So I'll throw out, I spent a lot of time in Iraq, and I spent 2 years at the embassy in Baghdad. So I'm well familiar with the different cultures between, DEA, FBI, embassy, agency, and the rest. So very unique, because, not a lot of guys have that experience. If you're not a FAO, your average Marine or even Navy SEAL doesn't spend a lot of time in embassies until later on in their career. And the average Joe doesn't really do any embassy time unless they go the FAO route. But I remember when I was brought over to work for General Allen as a COIN advisor, the guy that hired me, Lieutenant Colonel Roger Carsons, who later became the U.S. envoy for hostage affairs, who brought back, I want to say, 57 folks under both Biden and the first Trump administration. And he's a personal friend, another mentor, and just, a rock star individual himself. And I remember the advice he gave me. He says, Dan, this is not Iraq. Afghanistan is, you got your master's in counterinsurgency in Afghanistan, in Iraq. You're going to get your PhD here in Afghanistan. And it was really down to it wasn't 3 tribes, Sunni, Shia, and Kurds you're dealing with in Iraq. Right. There were 12 distinct tribes, all very different, all historical different cultures and language. And it was an entirely different game in Afghanistan than compared to Iraq or probably anywhere else in the region. And
with centuries old battle, they all had revenge against each other. Every one of them, because somebody's great grandmother got raped by somebody, 200 years ago, and they remember that, and they ain't letting it go. That's the way it is. And that's the way Afghanistan flowed. And the other thing you got to remember, we showed up like a big ATM machine, and that's why I sort of didn't agree with you about just nation building in Afghanistan. That wasn't our purpose. They just want to be left alone. I went back to Tajikistan a couple of years ago, Punj River. That's the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan. And I'm standing across the river. It's probably 30, 40 feet wide at this point. There's a farmer on the other side. So I started talking to him, and he's just tilling his land. I said, hey, how are things? He said, hey, life is great. We're not getting woken up in the middle of the night. We're not getting bombed, and we're being left alone. That's all they want. They want to be left alone. They want to practice their culture. They want to practice their religion, and and they want to live off the land. And there's nothing wrong with that. We can't condemn them for that. And so they're happy right now, as far as I could tell, at these people, in that part of Afghanistan. And you got to remember, Kabul was never Afghanistan. Kabul didn't represent the rest of Afghanistan. You get out in these villages.
The vast majority of Afghanistan, and I traveled all over the north and all over RC East and a little bit in RC South. Not other than the major cities, Afghanistan is living the same way it has for hundreds, thousands of years, especially in the villages, the mud huts, the Kolats, the dung from the buffalo, the burning, the fires. Yep. I mean, that was, and I remember I took a camera on. I was going through Dubai, and I remember I'd already had a camera with me, but I had 4 or 5 hours in Dubai before I'm going to Afghanistan. I ended up in one of the the shops that have every camera on the planet, and I got a hold of a Sony. High-end Sony. It was about the size of almost like a phone. It was a little bit thicker, but it was small enough that I could carry it anywhere. And it wasn't the bigger camera that I didn't want to be walking around like I'm a news reporter. But I had to document things as a coin advisor. But this small camera, I could literally fit in my pocket, and it had all the bells and whistles, and it had great range, and I took so many photographs. In fact, I took over 12,000 photos in a year in Afghanistan, because I averaged 1,000 photos a month. I would do an embed with whoever, a National Guard unit or an ODA or even the SEALs, and I would document, and I would take probably 500 pictures, sometimes in a 2-day, 3-day embed, and I'd use 3 or 4 pictures in the report. I'd write these 10-page reports that would go up to General John Allen, and I think that photography. And I got so many amazing photos, and it really, it just kind of opened up a whole another thing. But but I do want to keep going, because I think I want to get back to you coming home and taking over 1-6, the culture you had to deal with at 1-6, which was not. I mean, you were handed basically a shit battalion. Let's just be frank. You had, 350 odd guys that were not deployable. They were trying to get out. They were either conduct issues, or their time was up, but they were the stop loss. You had another third of the battalion, it sounded like, was deployed to other units because they had augmented deployed units. And then you had to build it. And you had, in the words of the former commander, hey, you got to square this unit away. And so just describe what it was like when you finally got command, battalion command, and go into the kind of the culture and the history, because every Marine I know was like, oh, I was at 2-4, I was at 3-5. I mean, and that's like, it's like a tribe, right? In the tribal culture of the Marine Corps. So just describe what it was like getting 1-6, and you were handed a unit that had a great reputation under previous leadership, but it had fallen away. And the things you did with that warrior mindset to get them back online, and you did it in a relatively rapid amount of time, especially getting certified as a BLT and later SOC. Special operations capable. So describe that challenge and obstacles you faced trying to get 1-6 online.
Yeah. So, basically it was a circumstance, right? So you've got Iraq as that's going on. So all the Marines are deploying to Iraq with their units or augments. And 1-6 was in Okinawa, and 1-6 came back from Okinawa, and it got fragmented, because they took anybody that had another deployment in their life cycle until the ES. They got farmed out to other units, so they went to 1-8, 2-8, whoever's going to Iraq, they got sent to that. So anybody that's non-deployable got left behind. So, but the problem is really a cultural problem, because the Marine Corps does this. It's got a 3-year cycle, right? So a Marine generally joins for 4 years. You got 1 year in training, and basically you got 3 years, right? And so a battalion essentially has a 3-year cycle. You get a Marine for 2 deployments. That's it. And so the Marine Corps, as you well know, and I know you guys make fun of us because we have a culture of doing things the hard way. I mean, that's the Marine Corps way, right? I mean, you know this.
And on the cheap.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it sucks. And it sucks when you're getting Marines ready for combat and you're going to combat, right? And because what happens is you get set up for failure, and it's not personal failure, but unit failure. And we basically, I'll give you an example that just still torques me, because it impacted one of my lieutenants later on, who was a battalion commander. And in 2020, if you remember, there's an AV that sank off the coast of California, killing 8 Marines and a sailor. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And if you go back into history and read the investigation report, it was due to degraded maintenance and readiness. I mean, that's the only reason that AV sank, because they literally took Hangar Queens from the parking lot and they gave it to this BLT. And they had to scrounge parts and get parts and put these AVs back together and make them seaworthy. And obviously, what happens? One of them started leaking transmission fuel, and the bilge pumps went, and that was it, right? And then nobody made a decision. Hey, time to get the hell out of this thing. Get out, right? And so that's what happened. And what happened was the battalion commander the BLT commander gets relieved. When it wasn't, he received, and this young man doesn't know shit about AVs any more than I did. All I know is, I know how to get in and out of them. I'm not the expert in that, and that they'll send you a bunch of reports, readiness reports. You look at them, and if you're in the 90th percentile, you're good. Nonetheless, he got hammered, ended his career, and this could have been avoided and should be avoided if the Marine Corps takes a hard look at readiness of its operational units and makes them a top priority. That's the bottom line. So in the case of 1/6, the battalion, as you mentioned, was gutted. We gave up 178 Marines that went to other battalions. I remember a battalion is essentially about 800 strong. So about 178 Marines are gone to another battalion, right? So we've already gutted that. And then in return, we got 300 non-deployables. These Marines know they're not going anywhere, right? And they don't want to train. They don't want to go out in the field, right? And they just want to be left alone. And what happens with the non-deployables in some cases, they could be that rotten apple, right? For the brand new young Marines. So we got 300 of this, right? And on paper now, 1/6 looks like, hey, it's staff to TO. It's a full up battalion. But the reality is we're not, because most of our Marines are non-deployables. I had a battalion by TO has 71 sergeants. I had 18, right? All new staff officers, all new chiefs in the S shops, all new company commanders, and new lieutenants. And then we, in return, that the 350 that I talked about, we got 400 new Marines straight out of SOI, School of Infantry.
Yeah.
Yep. All the way up 1 month before deploying. Now think about unit cohesion. How the hell are you supposed to train this young Marine to be part of a fire team or a squad and make him proficient in tactics 1 month prior to the battalion? Not all 400. They're all phased in as the class has graduated, and so that's the mess we're in.
I mean, SEAL, just for comparison, a SEAL platoon back when I was in would be roughly 14 guys, 7-man per squad. You'd have a 12-month. Every platoon would have the core of the original platoon, which is usually about 2/3. So you usually have anywhere from 10 to 12 guys that had been in the previous deployment for that platoon. Because what they did in the Navy or in the teams is you would deploy as Alpha platoon, you'd come back, and then they'd reform it, change that. You wouldn't be Alpha anymore. They'd change it to another name so they could keep up with the sorts and the accounting. But you would have a core of the platoon and usually 4 to 5 new guys in every platoon. But you would have a minimum generally of 12 months in a workup. Now, maybe sometimes you could do a compressed 10-month workup, but you would never deploy a month after. You would never take it. Would never work. And I can't imagine. We're talking 14, SEAL teams, which are higher experienced guys in training. But you're saying 400 new Marines a month before deployment.
Well, not all 400. They're all phased in, right? So I probably got maybe 30, 40, 50, whatever that class graduated and sent to us. Yeah. My point being is, and let me just reframe this whole issue in another way. So normally when you go from a battalion, which is 800 people, to a BLT, which is 1,200 people, right? So a battalion's got 800 people, 3 line companies, H&S company, and a weapons company. That's what a battalion's got. When you become a 1,200-man BLT, they give you an artillery battery, they give you an engineer platoon, they give you an AV platoon back then, they gave you a tank platoon, they give you a reconnaissance platoon, and they give you an LAV platoon. So you go from 800 to 1,200, 50% increase, right? And normally to do that transition, you get 6 months to grow. We got 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
That's crazy.
That's 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
3 weeks. And normally then to become a BLT, to get your SOC certifications and all that, because you have to send everybody to schools, different Coxswain schools and all that stuff, you get a year, right?
Yeah, no, I did a MEU workup with, I can't remember, it was out of San Diego. Did not do the deployment, but I spent a 12-month workup, and all of us, 9 months of our 12-month workup was with the Marines, getting you guys certified, and we cross-pollinate with the Force Recon guys. But Gunny, it was on the West Coast. So I don't know if you know any of those guys, but I know what the SOC qualification looks like because I saw you guys go through before that deployment.
Right. So that year of workup was compressed for us down to 6 months. So I got 3 weeks to form the BLT. Then I got 6 months to get qualified, special operations capable. And luckily we had some great help and instructors from SOTG, Special Operations Training Group. Great guys. I mean, phenomenal. They busted their ass as much as we did. But here's the issue, right? So the first day, so I take the battalion or the BLT up to AP Hill, and I want to get everybody qualified, right? I want to make sure everybody can shoot, and all our machine gunners, all our saw gunners, especially our saw gunners. Let's just talk about them for a minute. Every one of them failed the qualifications, operational readiness evaluation, and I'm standing there scratching my head like, what the hell is going on? How can this be? How can these Marines not know how to shoot their M249 saw, right? And come to find out, as I start digging into it, guess what happens? Remember those new Marines that are coming from SOI? They get handed the saw, right?
Of course. In our
right?
platoon, the new guys will be handed the M60 machine gun, and that's not a crew serve weapon in the teams. You carry the pig and you carry the ammo for the pig. Now, other guys will carry extra 200 rounds of 7.62 linked, but when you and it's always the new guys on and the first platoon, because no one wants to carry the pig all the way through their life in the teams for obvious reasons.
Right. So they gave it to the brand new guy. So once I figured this out, and I'm like, you got to be shitting me. It should be with the assistant fire team leader, right? He should be the guy carrying it because he's the next one most qualified. So we reallocated all the saws, get everybody on the firing line, and sure as hell, everybody qualified because they'd shot them before instead of young PFC doing it, right? So so we expended over 1,000,000 5.56 rounds just for the M16, just for that. Over 300,000 link rounds during the training because my whole thing was they have to have confidence in shooting, and we have to be able to operate at night. That's the key, because if you can operate at night, if you can do squad size night attack, you can do platoon, you can do company size and a battalion evolution. That means you can operate in daytime. One, you trust each other. All the command and signals and the control mechanisms. Make sure you got the right offsets and muzzle awareness and all that stuff. So I really focused on that. So now remember when I said we had 3 line companies, 1 weapons company, an H&S company, and a battalion. So we had to rewrite all those SOPs for the battalion. When I got made a BLT, guess what? You don't operate like that, right? You got a helicopter-borne raid company, you got a mechanized raid company, you got a boat raid company, and whatnot. So we had to rewrite all our SOPs, to transition to a BLT. And so we spent weeks while we're out training the Marines. The staff is making sure we're getting all this done. And then, the combat leaders course to getting all these people spun up because we didn't have the talent. So the staff NCOs taught our combat leaders course and the NCO course. And then I taught it also because I wanted my NCOs to know how I thought, and all I tell them, if you ever have a question, just ask yourself, if there's ever a thought, what's my decision? Ask yourself what Khan would do. And I'll tell you what Khan would do. Khan would always take the harder option. Right? Because the harder option is what gets you to success. You take the easier option, you can get your ass in trouble. So you got to have that type of conversation with your Marines so they understand your rationale. And and I'll give you another example in terms of we had no up-armored Humvees, none, right? None, because they're all going to Iraq. And I'm thinking, holy shit, I got to take my Marines to Afghanistan. I know what's going on in Afghanistan. So you remember those 350 non-deployables I had?
Yep.
So we had a formation. Everybody raise your hand. Who's a carpenter, welder, electrician, plumber, painter? Raise your hand. They raised their hands. We got them dungarees, and they became our maintenance platoons. So they went around maintaining the barracks. They loved it. One, they're learning a trade, or and 2, they don't have to go to the field and train. And 3, the welders. We went out and bought 3/8-inch steel plates, and we up-armored our own Humvees. That's what we did. And then we tested them against 81 mortar round and a Claymore mine. They withheld. And I remember when I did that, some mass sergeant from the MEF comes down to see me, And he's like, hey, sir, I'm Master Sergeant so-and-so, and you've done illegal modifications on your Humvees. And I remember I was in my office. I just looked at him. I said, Master Sergeant, are you going to Afghanistan with us? He's like, oh, no, sir. So I said, get out of my office. I threw him out. And he went to the Sergeant Major complaining that the CO just threw him out of the office. And the Sergeant Major threw his ass out too. So get out of here, man. Go away. So my point being is, and then when we got to Afghanistan, I know we're going to the mountains in central Afghanistan, right? And we've got this old flak jackets. You remember the heavy crap? And
no, because we're the SEALs. We got all the high speed white stuff. But I know what you guys had to carry for sure.
Yeah, and that's where I got it from. I got it from Special Forces, the SAPI plate holders. That's where I learned it from for my first tour. So so I got a tailor out in Kandahar to make me. I sent a demo out to him, an example. I said, make this up. And he made it up, but he couldn't get the material. He didn't have the right material, that nylons,
heavy duty nylon. Yeah.
So I sent him to Pakistan with some money. I said, you go to Pakistan, buy the damn material, get your ass back here, and I want 1,000 of these made up ASAP. And he did. And then I told the Marines, I said, here's the bottom line. I can't order you to wear them. I'm going to wear it because when you get to altitude, at the height, and it's going to be hot, my advice is travel light. And vast majority of them put it on, and they were thankful for it. And plus, they look pretty cool too. I think Marines love that shit, Anyway, so we did that, and so when we got into Afghanistan, but I'll tell you what, it wasn't easy trying to get them ready, and you really have to, you have to have the same intensity as a coach to get your team ready, because you're going to play in the Super Bowl. Combat is the decisive game that you'll play. Either you come back alive or you don't. So it's serious business, and that's the way I took it every day. I freaking, there wasn't a moment that I wasn't thinking about how to be successful in combat. Not a freaking moment. In the middle of the night, I'd dream about this stuff. I'd quickly write it down. Next morning, I'd go, to my headquarters and say, hey, this is the idea. What do you think? It's going to work or not? And I was obsessed with it. And you have to be obsessed because you're dealing with human lives, And I don't take great satisfaction in casualties. I really don't. Because there's a family behind that young Marine who entrusted his life in your hands. He trusts you. And if you can't return that trust and you don't have that type of passion and obsession, you don't deserve to be a combat leader. It's really that freaking simple. And I'll tell anybody out there, an infantry officer or a special forces guy, if you're not willing to die or sacrifice your career for those below you, you don't deserve to be in that freaking uniform. It's that freaking simple. And that's the way I approached it. I had no problem. I charged many gunfights with my Marines. And they'll tell you, it's written in the book, testimonies, right? And I did that. And I was willing to sacrifice my career. Shit, everybody wants to be a fucking general, but it means nothing to me. It means nothing. What means more to me is what my Marines said in that book. That to me, they're taking that to their grave. And I'm taking that to my grave also. I don't give a shit about any medal I got or didn't get, And that's a trust. That's that semper fidelis that we all have to. It's imbued in us, and that's what the Vietnam generation did us. That's what John Ripley did when he got underneath the bridge at Dong Ha.
A warm welcome here at the National Press Club. Welcome to the journalists, welcome to the Embraer team, and welcome to the other guests that we have here. I'm going to announce, and as some of you guessed it right when they came in, the first E2 order by an American operator. And that operator is Avello. We believe this is really a strategic shift to unlock profitability for the customer. I'm very pleased that we have Andrew Levy here as the CEO of Avello, and I'm very pleased to give the stage to share a little bit more about what Avello is going to do with the E2 195. Thank you very much.
Couldn't be more excited to be here as part of this historic announcement. We have such a great cultural fit as companies, so we're very, very excited to be Embraer's newest customer. We launched our airline in April of 21, and our target is focusing on small secondary airports of large metro areas. We've carried over 8 million customers since we started on 63,000 flights. And we've done all these things with 1,200 of the greatest crew members I could ever imagine having, and many of them are here with me today. This is the right airplane for us. It's going to open up opportunities for us that no other aircraft can serve. The best thing about the airplane, of course, is you will not find a middle seat on this airplane. It doesn't exist. We won't have any to offer. It's going to be the best cabin in the United States, and we're so excited about that. This is going to elevate our experience to the highest level, and we think our customers are absolutely going to love the airplane.
That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
And wired it up to blow it up at great risk to himself. But
it's really important, and your passion's coming out. It came out in the book, and trust me, I'm going to share at least probably the most powerful quote, because I read every quote from your men that wrote about a paragraph about you, and every one of them, as a former platoon commander, those are what you want to be remembered for, not what's on your chest, but what your men say about you. And you and I both, Major General Jones, right? Who I was part of his. I went and did an Odyssey weekend. He runs that Odyssey program, helping vets, and I spent a weekend up there. So I got to meet General Jones, what an incredible human being, and he had commanded 1-6 early on when you were handed it.
In Desert Storm.
But what did he give you? His advice was, "Hey man, you got a freaking disaster here."
I'll share that with you. We were at AP Hill, and T.S. Jones is one of my all-time heroes. I'm telling you. Okay, I love the man. He's my regimental commander, and and he talks so damn fast. I mean, he talks faster than I do. But I love the man, and did many operations with him, cold weather. Froze my ass off with him in the Arctic Circle, Alaska, and all that stuff. Love him, absolutely love him. So I was at AP Hill, and he was a former 1-6 commander. 1-6 got a very historic reputation going all the way back to Bella Woods. We earned that reputation, Devil Dogs, and Johnny the Hard, Medal of Honor, Navy Cross, multiple Silver Stars, bones sticking out of his leg, and he still commanded the battalion. That type of Marines they were. And so T.S. Jones carried that legacy into Desert Storm, and he was phenomenal. So when he heard that I had 1-6, he's always been proud of me. He's a mentor of mine. And when I got relieved, let me tell you something. He went to the commandant and said, "You relieved the wrong guy." T.S. Jones, that's the type of guy he is, right? Yeah. Because he knows people of character. And so he comes to AP Hill. He drives down from Quantico to AP Hill and sees me, and we're doing squad envelopments, right? And so he wants to go with the maneuver element, because normally I would go with the maneuver element to evaluate them. So he says, "Hey, I'll go with them, Genghis." I said, "Fine, sir, go." So he goes with them. I'm with the base of fire, and the base of fire is supposed to shift and then seize on signal. And so it seizes base of fire. They attack across the objective. All of a sudden, a round goes off from the machine guns, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" Not only my Marines are downrange, but I got the commanding general down there, right? And luckily, nothing happened. And so obviously you have to figure out what the hell happened with the gun. It was a cook-off and all that stuff. That's another issue. He comes back. He's like, Genghis. He goes, "You got work to do. This battalion's a mess." I said, "You damn right I do, sir. That's why I'm here. That's why I brought him to AP Hill. And you got to help me." So he said, "What can I do for you?" So I said, "Well, give me some AT rounds, And he gave us some extra AT rounds to shoot, but just a phenomenal individual, right? And I loved him. I still do. And but we were a mess, and took multiple rotations at AP Hill to get the battalion combat ready. And my biggest claim to fame, I'll tell you, is not the moniker of Death Walkers that the Afghans gave the battalion. The biggest thing that I take pride in, we didn't have a single fratricide issue. And the reason we didn't have a single fratricide issue is because of our SOPs and our command and control and our signal plans, right? Because we just ingrained that into everybody's head to make sure that you had offsets, to make sure you had muzzle awareness, and to make sure that that you're safe. Now, there's a couple of times, I'll tell you, when we did some gun runs with Harriers and shit, 20 meters, 25, 30 meters in front of you, the pucker factor goes up. And, a couple of times we lucked out, we didn't get any hits. So my favorite picture is a saw gunner. I bring you back in combat. Somebody took a picture of a saw gunner engaging a target, and he's got an air panel on his back. So the aircraft will recognize left and right lateral limit. He's got an air panel on his back, and he's got a gunner tapping him on the back, adjusting his fire. They didn't know they were being photographed. It's my all-time favorite picture because everything that we taught them at AP Hill paid off in combat. It's muscle memory, and that's what it's all about. Right. So I take great pride in that.
Well, you know, your leadership style comes out, the kind of person you are. And I don't think anyone doubts leading from the front. It's just second nature. But you talk about in the book about instilling a culture with your NCO, non-commissioned officers, and your senior non-coms, about and the lieutenants, about it's not you don't have them in the field and in garrison. That comment about like leadership of being seen out there constantly and guiding and pushing that. I think that was critical to turning around that battalion you were initially handed, to turning them into a very effective fighting force. I mean, you guys had an absolute historic deployment because of what you did, turning that BLT into the misfits, where General Jones was saying, hey, you got to square these guys away, and you had only 6 months to do it. You didn't have the 12 months that was normal. And I think a lot of it was that leadership philosophy you imbued down to your troops. And I was like, what are your troop leading procedure guidance for your Marines for like one-on-one leadership? What do you think was the key message, besides really being seen everywhere at all times, it sounds like?
Yeah, so as a battalion commander, I mean, every Friday I would teach a class, right? Get all my staff NCOs and officers separate, teach them, talk about leadership. I'd get all my NCOs, spend some time with them also, and the bottom line is, it's mission first and people always. And these aren't just bullshit words that I'm throwing out, right? And the mission first is because you got to get the people to the mission, and you got to get them trained up, and you got to do it truthfully. You can't just come up with these sayings, and there's got to be truth in that, right? And all the stuff, character and combat power, and in combat matters, right? Character is everything. Integrity is everything. And what I mean by that is Marine officers generally taught, hey, I'm leading from the front, and in front of a formation, you're running along and all that stuff. But when the rounds are being shot at you, you don't see the unit leaders. I remember first time I was in combat, and the enemy starts shooting at us, and everybody turns around to look back. And I'm thinking in my mind, what the hell are these Marines doing? Why are they turning around? Engage the freaking enemy. He's in front of you. Go, And the reason they're looking back at us, if you remember, squad online, squad V, squad, we taught them wrong. Unit leader is not supposed to be behind the unit. He's supposed to be in front of the unit. And then what happens is everybody keys off the unit leader. And when I made that switch, I realized, holy shit, man, the Marine Corps has been teaching this wrong. And I told the unit leaders, you'll be in front of your formation. And I had a couple of them say, hey, sir, but we may get shot. You're damn right you will. You're damn right. And you know what? I'm going to be in front of you because that's my job, right? And that's the key part about, being in combat. You got to have character. You got to have courage. That's so important, And accountability, self-accountability, institutional accountability is absolute. There's no excuses. There's no deflection. I can't blame somebody else for my unit's shortcoming. It's on me. Decentralized execution. It has to be, with discipline initiative. And that's what I always taught the Marines. I said, whenever you're wondering what to do, just ask yourself one question. What would Khan do? That's it. Ask that question. Whatever the answer is, just freaking do it. Just do it and be disciplined about it. And bottom line is this: honor has to be earned. It's not manufactured at all. And training and train some more muscle memory. And it's not about career progression. That's not who we are. We train down. Our job is to make sure that young Marine is successful. It's not about me and my career. It's got nothing to do with that. And if you imbue that across the board, they'll be successful. Everybody was successful. And you got to have moral courage to speak the truth. And that's probably one of my strengths and one of my weaknesses, because I never shied away from the truth. It is what it is, because I owe it to you. I owe it to my seniors to tell them the truth. I owe it to my subordinates and the Marines under my trust to tell them the truth. And I always have. I always will do. And if you lead Marines well, you're going to win. And the bottom line is the reason you want to win is to bring them home. And I still, it just eats at me that, I took 1,200 Marines into battle. I brought, 1199. And that one Marine was a damn shame that what happened. And it still freaking just eats at me.
We're going to talk about that because that's on my list. But,
so that in a nutshell is like my leadership philosophy is just do the right thing, man. Just, on the weekends, I'll tell you this much. On the weekends, every Friday I would take the battalion on a run, and I run a 7-minute pace, which is fast for a battalion, right? 7-minute pace. And I told everybody, I told them, I said, let me tell you something. I said, you fall out of this, you're going to go on remedial PT. That means you're coming in tomorrow on Saturday I'm the remedial PT officer for the battalion. And if a Marine comes in, his entire chain of command comes in. And then they would say, well, sir, why do we got to come in? Because you're responsible for him. He's your Marine. If he comes in, you got to come in and I'll be there and I'm going to PT you. And we're going to PT until one of us throws up. It's that simple, so get it done.
Well, you were emulating your first battalion commander when you were a first second lieutenant, and you met him not in uniform, dressed up with your service record in hand. You met him at the PT bar, pull-up bar, and he took you on a run. And the fact that if you couldn't hang with him, he was going to stick you in a staff pogue job. He wanted his studs to lead his Marines, to be his infantry platoon commanders, which, of course, listen, I know the culture. I went to the Naval Academy. I know the culture of guys that want to go Marine officers, man. They're like the SEALs, the guys that want to go to butts. They just have high and tights while they're in college because they're so motivated. So, but listen, the thing that defined the way your men looked at you, again, all these comments of the statements, and the one statement where in the middle of a firefight running up a hill, a young 22-year-old looks over and you are engaging the enemy, running up faster than him, and they can barely keep up with you when you're leading the charge in the middle of a fight. And that speaks volumes. You don't ever hear outside of, even in the SEAL teams, the only 05s that are still going into combat are squadron commanders at Dam Neck. It's, by the time you make 05 in the regular SEAL team, you're the SEAL of a SEAL team, and you're managing troops that are led by lieutenant commanders or 04s. But, that statement in the book by one of your devil dogs looking to his left going, holy shit, the battalion commander is basically, beating me up the hill going after the Taliban here in the middle of a firefight. And that just speaks 100% to why you got the moniker Genghis.
But why wouldn't you? Why, just think about it. If your son was with you and the enemy's shooting, wouldn't you want to be in front of your son?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the same principle, right? It's the same principle to me. It's the same principle. And to this day, I treat them like my own kids, right? That's the leadership principle. They're your children. And I'm not, minimizing it by calling them children, but I'm responsible for them as a father is for his own kids. It's that simple. That's my leadership philosophy, and I want them to do well. I want them to succeed. I want my kids, my biological kids, I want them to do well. I want them to succeed. And trust me, I was just as hard as my biological kids. They never understood me until now. Now that they're parents, they've got kids. Now they're understanding what the hell this crazy man was trying to teach us. And now I'm best of friends with my kids,
And your son went to the Naval Academy and went to the Marines. You want to share a little bit about his career or avoid that?
No, he's an infantryman. He's actually in many cases a lot harder than I am. He's more disciplined than I am. He's slightly taller. So when I run with him, I see his knees coming up, by my eye, and I'm like, holy shit, I got to keep up with this guy. And unfortunately, I'm getting old now, but I still, I still whipping on. He's a great young man. I'm very proud of him.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the deployment. So give us you rip in and into Afghanistan. And what month you get there in 04? It sounds like early 04. And then talk about what were the conditions on the ground and what was the environment and what was the mission? What was your tasking? I guess you put out a great message on the deployment, which your commander's guidance was. And I guess that's one thing I wanted to ask you about. What is your philosophy about commander's intent? What is your definition of commander's intent and instilling that in your men? You do it by your leadership, by setting the example, and you've made that very clear. And no one questions it. But if you could summarize commander's intent, how would you do that?
Well, I used to teach at the General Officers Warfighting Program. I was one of the instructors, right? And I'd see these brand new brigadier generals coming in there, and they had to write their commander's intent and concept of ops to brief next day to the 3-star. And it'd be like mental freaking gridlock. These guys couldn't write a cogent freaking paragraph because they're trying to wordsmith it, right? Because they all think, every commander thinks, I'm going to write this commander's intent that's going to be in Lee's Lieutenants or published in the Marine Corps Gazette. That's complete horse shit. I'll tell you why. Because a young Marine doesn't read the Gazette. He doesn't. They ain't got time, and nor do they care. And so I never wrote my commander's intent really for the Gazette. Ultimately, obviously the commander's intent's got to have a purpose. It's got to have key tasks and an end state. Why? What does success look like? What's our mission? What do we need to do? And what does success look like? That's commander's intent. And if you want to expand on it, you identify the enemy center of gravity and all that stuff. But the Marines don't need to know that. Mine was literally 3 words. 3 words: find, fix, and finish. And what I meant by that is, hey, Marines, we're going to find the enemy. I'm going to use the local Afghan fighters to find the enemy. I'm going to fix them either with maneuver. When you see CAT open up with their 50 cals, that means we're fixing the freaking enemy. Or if you see aviation coming in and drop an ordnance, that means I'm fixing them. And then you stand by, because then we're going to finish them through maneuver. We're going to envelop left or we're going to envelop right. That's it. That's all you got to know. It's that simple, and that's our playbook. Every time, that's what we did. The only thing difference was how we're going to, my Afghan militia fighters and Col Khan. I love that man. Unfortunately, he was assassinated. He was key in all this. He was key in finding the enemy for us. He was key into getting us into fights. And I tell him, hey, once we start shooting, get the hell out of my way, right? Because I got all this stuff coming with me, and I'd be right up there up front with them. And so the Marines knew that as soon as they start hearing the gunshots going off, and my cat platoons up front with the heavy guns opening up, hey, we're fixing the enemy. They're getting ready, because either the battalion commander is going to say, hey, envelop left or right. And sometimes we did double envelopments, right, on left and right both. So they got to be able to visualize. So part of the commander's intent is, how do you explain it to somebody so they can visualize what the hell you're doing? And the simpler you keep it, they remember it. And then when it comes to execution, because you got to execute, it's all about execution. So I kept it very simple at the end of the day, my commander's intent. But I'd really sit there and talk to him about it. I talk him through it, ask him, hey, repeat what I just said, right? And and if they couldn't repeat it, stand by for some push-ups, because we're gonna be knocking them out. Pay attention to what the hell I'm telling you, because it's gonna save your damn life too. So that's the way you got to treat this. My job was, not only a father but a coach, and maybe I'm a little bit like John Madden or something, but I'm fired up, and I'm still obsessed by it. I'd love to be a freaking platoon commander, company commander, or a battalion commander right now. I'm ready. I can do it. Send me to Iran. I'll go kick some ass over there in a heartbeat. No worries.
Well, we're gonna ask more about, because you absolutely, and of course the language capability you had in being from Pakistan, and by the way, Afghanistan, as you know, is also the land of Pashtun. I mean, they're very, very similar, and the same. Pashtun was it was either Pashtun or
Dari.
Yeah, but and do you speak Dari? I'm assuming you
No, I mean, I understand some of it, not a lot. Dari is more like Farsi.
But the vast majority, the largest ethnic minority or majority in Afghanistan are the Pashtuns, correct?
Pashtuns are the largest. And what happened was that, just for your viewers, the Brits drew the Durand line between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and half the total tribe, I'm talking Pashtun. There's many tribes, sub-tribes. Half of it stayed in Afghanistan and the other half's in Pakistan. Right. So, so it's basically the same people. And that's why when people say, so-and-so was hiding in he's got cousins there, man. I mean, it's that simple. You got to understand it, I mean,
well, you brought up the British. I had a comment in there about, Afghanistan is famously the graveyard of empires, going back to even Alexander the Great had challenges there. The British obviously had challenges, the withdrawal from Kabul, what was that, 1843. And the Russians, obviously in the Soviet area. What was it in your, and I know the answer, but your mindset that was going to counter that? And I think largely it was your language capability, because you really integrated those 3 tribal elders and the war. You had 3 different allegiances, as you described in your book, that John Muhammad, and the other ones that, and another Adam Muhammad, and then
Muhammad. Yep.
But you really integrated them, and you didn't take crap from them. I mean, they would try and bullshit you about, oh, this is going to cost X, or you promised me this. And you, when any other, say, a Irish kid from Boston would not have had the same patience to realize the importance of integrating the local tribal networks into that BLT, because you really were a joint force, if you will.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't understand that, right? And so they're trying to give me all this, theater intelligence, and operational intelligence and all that stuff. and a lot of it's just perishable, right? I mean, you go to a certain grid square, there ain't nobody there. So I'm thinking, man, this is just a complete waste of time. And so I started making local relationships. And through the local relationships with these warlords, and these aren't good people, don't get me wrong. You know, they're not good. They're not nice people. It's not the type of person you want to bring to your house, you know, because most of them are murderers because they want to stay in power, right? And that's how it works. John Muhammad Khan, as much as I love him, I truly do, because, you know, he's a warrior brother of mine. We fought together. He's a bad dude. He's killed a lot of people, right? But by the same token, he has to respect you and fear you. Now, I'll tell you one simple mistake. Whenever I see a picture of an U.S. military officer sitting on the ground with the Afghans, I knew the game's over. You've just given up your manhood. I would always sit in a chair. I would have a field chair, you know, like soccer mom chair, right?
Yeah.
It always
Yeah.
set out. I'd sit in because they want authority. They respect authority. And you'll see Afghans would gather around me in a semicircle because I'd let them know, hey, I'm in charge. So you got to play that role also. And what people didn't realize was, you know, Marine leadership traits are JJ did tie buckle, right? If you want me to break them down, I can, but there's 14 leadership traits, and that works. But there's one missing in JJ did tie buckle. Accountability is not there. It should be JJ did tie a buckle, because accountability is not there. So Marines, it's based on trust leadership. My Marines trusted me. I trusted them. I tell them to do something, they'd do it. If they needed something, I'd make sure they got it, right? It's based on that. But the Afghans, it's not based on trust. It's based on fear. If the Afghans don't fear you, they're not going to follow you, right? They only follow people that they fear. So I was caught in this conundrum between trust leadership and fear leadership, right? And people never understood that. And the people that judged me on this, they couldn't have done it, right? Ultimately, that judged me, they couldn't have led those Afghans, because the Afghans wouldn't follow them. And in fact, one of them, the Afghans called them Chugwarai, plump lamb, right? It's such a disrespectful statement. And you know what? They wouldn't even think about calling me that.
Well, I'll tell you, when I got to CENTCOM, mobilized after 9/11, you had all these reservists augmented the CENTCOM staff. I mean, half the staff at one point were mobilized reservists. And I remember my best friends, besides the soft LNOs from the UK, Australia, New Zealand, were all the Marines who were actually working up the JIAF under General Harrell. And I swear to God, every Marine officer, 04, 05, even reservists, you couldn't tell the difference between a reserve Marine 05 or 06 or an active duty one, because they all had the PT standard. And I think there was one Marine major that wasn't that out of shape, if you will, but did not look like everyone else. And his last name was Abel. And he was a major, and everyone called him Major Unable. And that was like, and he took it in stride, but like, that's what blew me away, because every 04, 05 Navy reservists, the Army guys at Air Force, they looked like a guy that had been in corporate America and then all of a sudden was trying to squeeze into his, desert, camis, on drill, but not the Marine Corps. And there was no difference you couldn't tell the difference between an active duty Marine or a reserve Marine officer. And they also didn't take a back seat. Like Colonel Mogdanos, who was 5'6", an inch shorter than me. When he made 06, I remember there were some active duty, an armor officer in particular, tried to basically dress him down because the week before had been a light colonel. And I was never more impressed watching how all the Marines handled themselves. Like they were upholding the Chesty Puller standard for the Marine Corps. And that's something that the Marines do as a culture better than anyone. But even that aside, there were elements in the Marine Corps, and you've alluded to it earlier about the academics, the book, the Commandant reading list Marine officers, because you deployed with an entire MU. So describe the MU structure, and then you had the BLT, and you guys were out in the field and like virtually the whole time, whereas the Marine Expeditionary Unit seemed to be sitting on the FOB the whole time, managing the war from their PowerPoints and their fancy slides and their flat screen TVs. When you were using sand tables with rocks and probably twigs on the grass on the ground when you're doing sand tables out in the field, as compared to what the guys were doing at FOB Ripley. So describe that culture clash of what you were doing building sources, using local networks, understanding the customs, and then your leadership that was overall in charge, even when they came out to the field, didn't even want to interact with your Afghan counterparts. And that speaks volumes on levels everywhere.
Yeah, so I mean, just for your viewers, I mean, a MEU basically is the MEU command element, about a company-sized unit that commands the MEU. It's got three main elements: the aviation combat element, which the helicopters, used to be Harriers, now they got F-35 Bravos, and then you've got the MEU Combat Service Support Group, right? MSSG, and or Combat Service Support Element. And so they're both about roughly about 500, so that's about 1,000. And then the brunt of the MEU, about 50% of the MEU, is the BLT, the Battalion Landing Team. And the Battalion Landing Team is the main fighting arm of the MEU, aside from the pilots, right? That we have, and they've got Cobras also, and the Vipers, and they're phenomenal. But I can go into that too. But the BLT is really the fighting element. Now, the problem is this. Everybody thinks this MEU is like, this big, powerful unit. It's not. It's not meant to be. MEU is really a crisis response force, an expeditionary force meant for, short duration operations. So they've got raid companies. They do company-size operations. That's what a MEU does. But when you start putting an entire BLT out there, it's bigger than the MEU itself. Essentially, it's half the MEU, and it's not sustainable. So MEU is not designed for sustained operations ashore. It's designed to go off amphibious shipping, do a raid, do a strike, do a rescue of a trapped down pilot, and come back to the ship. That's what it's designed for. So when we went into Afghanistan, we first went into Kandahar, and it took us about 10 days to get everything reassembled. We offloaded ships in Qatar. From Qatar, we took C-17s into Kandahar, and it took us about 10 days. And, so again, you have to get the Marines up. And when they got into Kandahar, as soon as they come off the aircraft, getting PT gear, we're PTing. And I took them out to Tarnik Farms to start shooting, just to get them engaged, start building, let them peek. I started getting them left seat, right seat with our Army brethren. And then the other thing that we really did that other units didn't was they'd pick up their Terps outside Kandahar Air Base. So there'd be a gaggle of these Terps, people looking to work. They could speak English, and they just pick them up for the day or 2 days or 3-day operations, and they go with them. Well, that doesn't build cohesion. So I said, bullshit. So I got like 40 Terps to come inside the base. You have to get permission, right? And they lived with their squads. So every squad, there was cohesion, there was trust between the Afghan interpreters and the Marine squads. And so that was a huge plus. And we kind of did this in the 10-day routine. Then from after that, we sort of launched. We were supposed to go up north to Tarankot, which is basically a small city, maybe a few thousand people, of Oruzgan province. Oruzgan province is very central because essentially all the trouble essentially starts in Oruzgan province. Mullah Umar was from that area. Hamid Karzai is from that area. And but the issue was when we went, it was a 3-phase operation. First phase is we're going to go to Oruzgan and Tarankot, and we're going to establish a MEU FOB, right? And the MEU FOB was like 5-mile perimeter. It had a runway in it. So they took 400 Marines, essentially my entire artillery battery, my 81st platoon, to secure the MEU FOB. So it became a self-licking ice cream cone. So the MEU command element sitting in this secure FOB, I want to get out there and want to fight. And I don't want to sit on a FOB because when you come out of FOB, you can either go straight, left, or right. And when you're doing that, some little kids are sending a signal with a mirror or with the radio thing, hey, they went left. So everybody knows which way you're going, right? You come out of the MEU FOB in helicopters, somebody's watching you, knowing which direction you're going into. So it's asinine. So, basically, I stayed out of the FOB, south of the MEU in a village called Kike. I started operating around there. And the MEU was really trying to get us back to the FOB to operate as companies. And I didn't want to do that. We wanted to operate as a battalion, whatever I had left. So we stayed out there. And then the MEU assigned me to do 3 short duration operations, Blade Runner, Thunderball, Cadillac Ranch. And I couldn't figure out where the hell they're coming up with these stupid freaking names from because I couldn't translate them into Pashto to explain to my Afghan militia. How the hell do I explain Cadillac Ranch? It doesn't translate. Just stupid names that they got from Bruce Springsteen albums. This is the type of freaking mindset they had going on. Nonetheless.
You think about it, though. You think about it for a second. You know, it'd be the equivalent of the Vietnam era fob being named after a Jane Fonda movie. Think about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's stupid. It's just asinine, right? And so afterwards, once this is going on, and then these 3 operations, we really didn't do much. We're getting these, hey, go to this village, this thing, so we ran around. It was just stupid, right? It was just asinine. And so one day the commanding general comes down, and you're talking about terrain model, exact same thing. Terrain model on the ground. He came down to where I was, and he basically said, I expected more out of your Marines. You guys really haven't done anything. We spent all these resources on you. And I looked at him. I said, you know what, General, turn me loose. I'll show you what I can do. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, we got to get in bed with the local militias. That's what we got to get in with them because they know where the enemy's at. You turn me loose. You let me do that, and I'll do it. I'll show you what I can do. So he kind of said, okay, let me think about it. I'll let you know. So next day, word came down. Yep, you got a leash. Go. So that's when we came up basically with Asbury Park, another freaking fancy name. I don't even know where. I think it's in New Jersey or some shit.
It's It's a Bruce Springsteen album.
Oh, great. I hope that, and all I'm thinking is, shit, I'm going to die in Asbury Park, and they're going to put that on my freaking tombstone. The great Genghis Khan died in Asbury Park. What the? It's just stupid shit. But anyway, so Asbury Park, and we started kicking ass, and the plan was we would do Asbury Park, get to a place called Des Chopin in Kalat, and get to the Ring Road, and then go down to Kandahar. Game over. We're going home. Right? Roger that. I can do it. No problem. And I had all these local networks and all that stuff. But we go to Asbury Park, and what had happened was I'd been operating in that area a week before, and we turned around and left, right? And the Taliban never expected us to come back that same route. And a week later, we show up, and these guys are on all these valleys, and we just commenced to, fighting for 17 days, every day. Every day we fought. And we get to Des Chopin. The day before, I get this call. I mean, literally, people are tired, broke up, 40 wounded. It's just and we just kicked some serious ass. And so right before we're going to Des Chopin, our objective, going through these mountains, we're broke. I mean, literally, vehicles are. I mean, everything is just demolished. And so the Muse CEO says, "Hey, I'm flying in tomorrow. I want to ride with you." And and all I'm thinking is, why? I mean, who cares? I got to secure another freaking LZ. Bring you in. Anyway, so we do it. We get to Des Chopin. He's like taking pictures with me. Telling me, "Hey, I'm going to put you in for Silver Star. I've heard what you've done, all this stuff." And I'm like, "Great, sir. Awesome." And it's just you're tired, right? I mean, the deal. And
you had been in the same set of camis that entire, like you went 100 days straight. You and your men went 100 days straight wearing the same set of camis. Is
a little over 3 months. Yeah, we wore the same camis. Never took a shower. None of that shit. Never ate hot chow. Slept on the ground wherever the hell you slept. The longest I slept that entire time was a 2-hour period. The rest of the time I'd doze off and wake up. That type of stuff. So, I mean, whatever. We all did what we need to do. Each one of us lost between 20, 30 pounds. So we get to Des Chopin. He gets his pictures taken. Helicopters come. He goes away. And I'm talking to the locals and stuff. And all of a sudden, Mute Commander wants to talk to him on the radio. And he's all excited. He goes, "Hey, I got some good news." I'm like, "What's that?" He's like, "Hey, we're getting extended." And I'm like, "To do what? Why are we getting extended?" I said, "We just fought, and what do you want me? I want you to come back." I said, "I just came through those mountains, and you want me to go back through those mountains?" I said, "This is insane. This is bullshit. We're going to get Marines killed and hurt for no freaking reason. We're all going home. So what's the thing? Oh, no, this is going to be the longest MEU that's fought, in a sustained land operation. It's for, and I was like, you know what? Roger that. And I threw the freaking phone down, and I'm so pissed that I walked off, and I went to this bluff, and I started crying, and I cried for my Marines. And my OPSO comes up to me, and he's like, "Sir, are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm not fucking okay, Brian." I said, "Let me tell you something." I said, "You remember this day?" I said, "You're going to be a general officer one day, and don't you ever treat your Marines like this." And right there and then I decided I was going to retire. I'm done with this, dog and pony show. Anyway, I get the Marines together, and I tell them, "Hey, here's the bottom line. We got to go back through those mountains, and we're Marines. We're going to do our duty." And I tell John Mahmoud Khan, "Hey, this is what happened." He's like, "Why?" He's like, I'm going to Kandahar. I'm not going back to those mountains. I said, I understand. You know, you go to Kandahar. That was a deal we had. I'm going back to those mountains, and you know, God be with you. Next day, we saddle up. I come to a T in the road. Right is to the mountains. Left is to Kandahar. I take a right. I'm going down. I get a call. John Muhammad Khan's following us. Stop. I walk back. He comes out. He goes, he said, Colonel Khan, he goes, you're my brother. He goes, I can't let you go there by yourself. I give him a big hug. I thank him. And we go to the mountains. And we end up, you know, if we fight our way back, we end up at like 10,000 feet because I chased these enemy down. And quick story, 10,000 feet. John Muhammad Khan, you know, John Muhammad Khan's a clown show. I mean, it's just, the guy's funnier than hell. Because he had me buy him 3 to 4 sheep every day for his people to eat. And so I'd heard the enemy gone up this mountain ridge line, Weti it's called. So I said, I'm going up there. He's like, no, he said, I'm not going with you. He said, I'm not climbing that mountain. You guys are nuts. So I said, I'm going, you know. And I said, you want to be a coward? Be a coward. You can sit here and eat your damn sheep. And so he said, okay, I'll go with you, but get me a donkey. And, you know, light bulb came on. I said, shit. I said, I'll get you a donkey, no problem. But then I'm thinking, shit, I can take my heavy guns and everything on the freaking donkey. So we rented a bunch of donkeys, and I got some great pictures of Marines, you know, hauling with donkeys, and we get to the top, and nothing's going on. But the enemy had a pattern, and their pattern was right at dusk and at sunrise, they would attack you. At dusk, because they're nods, you know, I'm talking about the transition period.
Right.
So everybody's telling me that, hey, sir, they're not up here. Let's go back. I'm like, nah, we're spending the night. And and right at dusk, sure as shit, they open up. Right. And one of my platoons is pinned down, and you know, they're calling, and they're like one ridge line over, they're pinned down, machine guns shooting down at them. And we call for air support. Well, that just so happens that day, Bagram and Kandahar all, they got sandstorms, nothing's flying. Because you got a squadron common, you flick on there, troops in contact, everything comes to you. And a U-2, an airplane answers up. What kind of aircraft are you? What kind of weapons you got? Happen to be U-2. I'm kind of, amped up. I was like, hey, you got no ordnance. What can you do for me? He's like, calm down, Genghis 6. He goes, I can relay for you. I was like, shit, this guy's right. And I said, roger that. So we gave him the JTAC brief, and he goes, we got a B-1 inbound, and he's going supersonic. He's coming to your pause. In 3 minutes, he'll be there. And he's coming in from Diego Garcia, and I don't know where he was in relation between us, whatever he did, So about 3-4 minutes later, he checks in, and he's put all the data on the JDAM and all that stuff. And then he goes, so the Kayak in Qatar refuses permission to drop. After all that shit, there's some major in the Kayak refuses permission to drop. And legend has it that I told him, I said, MF, if you don't give him permission, I will find you and I will fucking kill you. Right. And evidently that went on the squawk box. Right. And some general gets on. He goes, hey, it's General so-and-so, what's going on? I said, sir, I'm the senior guy on the ground. I got JTAC standing next to me. We need clearance to drop. So he goes, wait, one comes back. He goes, cleared hot. But so happens that JDAM's frag pattern was an issue then. So the next thing was a frag pattern issue. So we had, elevation separation. The frag pattern was going up. And I talked to my major with that platoon. And I said, hey, here's the deal. You good with it? He goes, yes, sir. I said, on my count, get everybody down. God be with you. I told the B-1, I said, release. He drops a bomb, takes out the machine gun position. He comes around. He's got his, all his, I don't want to talk too much about it, but he's got all the systems looking down. And he's like, hey, on the other side of the ridge line, there's a big group with camels and donkeys and shit. And those are the guys we're looking for. I said, re-attack. Helping others. He dropped 2 more JDAMs on their ass. Next day, there's about 30 of them dead, camels, all that mess. So it was a good day for us. And so we came back down. We made it up back to, by now, they're named that FOB at Terran Code as FOB Ripley, right? Which is kind of odd over, but, not taking anything away from Colonel Ripley. I love him. But there's reasons for that. And you can imagine why, right? So we get back to FOB Ripley. And I know something isn't right because Geraldo had come and visited with us, and we got all this press time to the BLT. And Geraldo sort of, I was a unique story, right? So he put me on, and I'd never seen these things until later on. I had no idea what's going on. And then all of a sudden, I mean, this is like a big thing. I mean, we've used freaking the Grim Reaper, HC-130s. We used everything. I mean, hundreds of sorties of aircraft. And the commanding general comes down, makes the MEU the main effort, and extends us for another month. So the Marines just got extended for a week. We just got extended for another month. And they want us to go up north, Miam-Do area, and go fight up there. And while all this going on, this whispering campaign starts. My Marines are coming talking to me. Hey, sir, they're asking questions about you. About what? That you beat somebody up. I said, it's impossible. I've never been alone. I didn't beat anybody up. And so they're waking up the Marines in the middle of the night. Hey, did you see Colonel Khan beat anybody up? And they're like, no. I told the Marines, I told the truth, man. Don't bullshit around. And then they wake up some Marines. Hey, did you do Colonel Khan's laundry? I haven't changed my clothes. I don't wear skivvies. I'm an infantryman. I have no laundry, right? This is the type of shit that was going on. And so these start rumors, Machiavellian, right? Anyway, so I go see the MEU commander. I'm like, what is this horse shit? He goes, don't worry about it. It's a minor allegation. We'll take care of it. Okay. Next day later, he calls me and he's like, you got to sign this letter. Non-punitive letter of caution. I'm like, you got to be shitting me. For what? He goes, just to close the case, just sign it, whatever. And if you don't sign it, then I'm going to have NCIS come do an investigation and you can't go on the next mission. And all I'm thinking in my mind, hey, I got to be with my Marines. So I said, give me that thing. I signed it, walked off. And so we head off north, do a river crossing, which was very interesting. And he wanted to come with us. I said, come. He lasted about 8 hours. First gunfight we got into, he called in a helo, flew out of there because nobody wants to take the risk, right? Nobody wants to be around because these Afghan militia may do some serious, on any given day, they could do 3 war crimes. I mean, I stopped them many occasions. And so he flies back. And so we go up there, a little bit of action, not as much as the 17-day operation. And then we come back and, and then it's over. And I'm literally done with these clowns. And we go down to Kandahar. He wants me to fly with him. I refuse. I said, I'm going with my Marines. I drive back down to Kandahar with them. And we were so broke. I remember coming to Kandahar City. I used to drive my own vehicle, right? Because I didn't have enough Marines. They're taking my Marines, and I knew where to go and all that stuff. So I'd drive my own Hummer. And as we came into Kandahar City, the vehicle in front of me, the tire literally came off the drum and went and hit a rickshaw in Kandahar City. Big problem, right? Crowd gathers. And the base launches the QRF, helicopters flying up top. It's just a mess. I tell them, get the helicopters out of here. I'll take care of it. I give the rickshaw driver $200. Let's say, get out of here. Go away. Anyway, we make it to the base, and it's pretty interesting. You realize you're so isolated that when I came to the base, there's people lined up because we're the lost battalion coming back. And I remember first time I walked on the tarmac, I stopped and I said, Sergeant Major, you feel that? He's like, what's that, sir? It was flat ground because he'd lost the senses, right? So it's pretty interesting in that respect. Then we get called up to Bagram, for the dog and ponies, press briefs and all this happy horse shit. Ambassador wants to meet you. And I was in no mood to talk to anybody. And I was so freaking pissed off that I'd even symbolically turn in my pistol. I'm done fighting. And so I go to Kabul and they have a press day. And, all the POs are running around, with the little, I don't want to say anything bad. And so they want to showcase me and I refuse. I said, I ain't doing this shit. She's like, no, here's the talking. I said, I'm not doing it. I'm telling you. I said, you speak better than I do. You don't want me in there because I'm going to say something and it's not going to go off well for the Marine Corps. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee with the Sergeant Major. I said, Sergeant Major, let's go. So these guys did their press brief. Then all the big generals and ambassadors slapping us on the back and all this shit. And we get to the airport for catch an airplane, take us back to Kandahar. And the airport's shutting down. HK shuts down. They don't have any instruments, night flying. So it's getting dark. And I told the MEU, I said, hey, when's the airplane? This place shutting down. And it was late. So they said, we're going to drive up to Bagram, right? And I said, I'm not driving anywhere. I don't have a pistol. I don't have a weapon. I'm not going anywhere. I'll sleep here. I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. Good luck. Anyway, the commanding general finds out we're stuck there. He launches a Chinook. So we can see, you can see Bagram in the distance from Kabul airport. So we can see this Chinook barreling down. comes, lands, we hop on, takes us back, lands, and the MUCO comes out and he's just screaming. He's like, you tell that MF I'm a 06. He should have landed at the VIP spot. And legend has it, I lost it. And I said, will you shut the F up? You should thank this guy for coming picking us up. And I walked off. I hauled off, and they went to the VIP quarters. I literally found an A-frame, empty cot. I laid down, go to sleep. In the morning, I wake up and I'm looking around. There's a bunch of soldiers and Marines. It was a transient barracks. They're standing, they're looking at me. They go, sir, are you Colonel Khan? I go, yeah, I am. They go, sir, can you tell us what happened? So I said, where's the head at first? Let me go to the head. And, is there coffee around here? Just a couple of young kids running off, get coffee. I went to the head, cleaned up, I sat down, shot the shit with them. And then I went to the jock, and they wouldn't let me in because I didn't have a weapon. There's some sentry there saying, sir, base order, because everything you got, that Pizza Hut is there, Baskin Robbins.
Yeah. No, I know
it's turned into a little
well.
city, right? And so they wouldn't let me in because I don't have a weapon. Sir, base order says you got to have a weapon. I said, young man, do you have any idea where I just came from? Do you have any clue? You were in Bagram. This is safer than the United States as any city. So my sergeant major intercedes. He's like, sir, please go ahead. I got it. So I go in, and the general's like excited to see me. He's hugging me. And he said, I'll be down tomorrow. I'll talk to you Marines. I said, roger that, sir. So he flies down to Kandahar next day, gives a kick-ass speech, then has breakfast with a squad of Marines on the side. And I'm sitting on a side table with the deputy CJTF commander, good guy. And he's like, Genghis. He said, you can write your ticket in the military. You tell me what you want to do. I'll make it happen. Do you want to be General Pace's aide and all this stuff? As he's saying this, they go, attention to orders. I'm like, shit. Okay, everybody pops up, and they start reading a Bronze Star citation. They pin it on the new commander, and I'm just like, "You got to be shitting me!" And as we sit down, she's the deputy CG is like, "Genghis, what do you want?" I said, "Sir, I'm retiring. I am done." And he spits his coffee out. He's like, "What?" He goes, "Why?" I said, "For shit like that." I said, "I even recognize a single Marine. This guy's getting a Bronze Star. You got to be shitting me." And I just left, and then we flew out to. From there, we flew out to Kuwait to meet our ships. And, you have to do all this USDA agriculture inspection, wash down, all this happy horse shit. And so they put my Marines up in Camp Victory, up by the border of Iraq. I don't know any different. Okay. So we're there. It's all sand, transient tents, pretty decent chai hall. So I told the Marines, I said, here's the bottom line. I'm going to wake you up in the morning. We're going to PT. And after that, the rest of the day is yours. The only requirements I got is you all got to eat 3 meals and put some weight back on. That's it. I told staff and COs and officers, I said, hey, I want you to walk around the chow hall with trays of ice cream and shove it down their throats. We got to look like Marines when we get home. And so then I got a call that, hey, you got to go down to RF John for a meeting. Okay, grab the sergeant major, drive down to RF John. And it's like a freaking base in the United States. So I'm like, where's the MEU at? The command element. They said, oh, sir, they're by the pool. I go by the pool. These guys are hanging out in freaking lounge chairs, sunbathing. And I'm thinking in my mind, the guys that fought, that kicked ass, right, are up there in the freaking desert, right? We had AC in the tents, but it's dirt, sand floors, right? So I tell them, I said, what the hell is this? Well, how come my Marines aren't down? Well, we don't have enough room. So I said, at least we could have brought 1 or 2 companies down here, and you guys should be up there. I said, this is horse shit. I said, let me tell you something. If I had a grenade, I'd frag every one of you. And I turned around and walked off. Sergeant Major's like, sir, you can't say shit like that. I said, fuck them, man. I'm retired. And so I went back, and then we loaded ships. And then the other thing, since I brought up the Bronze Star, let's talk about the combat action ribbon. You want to talk about it?
I was gonna go back to that and go back to checkpoint 321.
Okay, well, let's talk about the combat action ribbon first. So when we came back after all the operations, we're heading down to Kandahar, Index. In a staff meeting, it's announced that everybody that's at FOB Ripley, that spent a night at FOB Ripley, is going to get the combat action ribbon. I'm sitting in the staff meeting going, you got to be shitting me, But I didn't say anything in public, so I saw him afterwards. I said, sir, this makes absolutely no sense. I mean, the regulations are very clear. It's a personal award. There's very specific guidelines. You got to receive or return fire, He said, well, it's my call. I said, I understand that, but let me tell you something. When we get home, I'm going to bring it up. I told it to his face. I know, I'm not scared of the guy. He's
And
a little
this was the MU commander who spent 8 hours out of that entire deployment actually out in the field off the fob, correct?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And whenever he'd come visit, so maybe total of 20 hours.
Yeah,
He'd come for a couple hours with the commanding general, whatever, escort him. But here's the deal. I mean, so we were fighting over 100 miles away, right? My Marines sacrificed their lives. They got wounded. We lost some, and these guys get a freaking combat action ribbon, which is an infantryman's, badge of honor that you've been there, done that, right? It's like you tried it.
And they're
right?
all fobbits. They never left the fob, right?
Yes,
rear echelon motherfuckers. I mean, let's go back to Vietnam.
Yes. We got no shower. We talked about that. No hot chow. We're in the same damn clothes.
No surf and turf on July 4th when the mule back at the fob. After you guys had just finished 100 days straight wearing the same set of camis, sleeping on the ground, moving how many miles? 500 miles at one point from one of those. From the start of the operation, you guys were virtually 3 months. I don't think you guys slept in the same spot. And 4th of July, you guys get denied a decent meal. And how ironic, because the whole
So what happened there was, we coordinated directly with the MSSG to send us, steaks 4th of July. And the day before, I told my ops, I said, hey, make sure the steaks will get here for the Marines. And he comes back, he said the MU canceled it. I'm like, what? So I pick up the handstand. I was like, what happened to our steaks? He's like, because you didn't go through the mute, so we canceled it. I said, we're supposed to coordinate directly. I don't need to go through you. I can go straight to the MSSG. It was all coordinated. He said, well, we won't have any helos flying next day. It's maintenance stand down. Okay, roger that. Next day, guess what happens? 2 helos are flying up towards the position. So I'm thinking, oh, great. So maybe this guy thought it through and, is going to send steaks, right? It's James Webb. Former SecNav, remember him?
I've met Secretary.
I'm a good guy, And then they brought like 2 or 4 cases of water, those liter bottles, for like 1,000 some people I have. I've got like 24 bottles, 24 liters of water they brought in because it's the 46s. They can't at altitude. They can't. I mean, it's just screwed up. Their mindset was messed up. It's just like exactly what they did in Kuwait, right? So, but the combat action ribbon, they wrote it up. I have the citation. There's 28 incidents that they wrote up, right? 23 of the incidents, they weren't even involved. It was mainly the BLT and the Force Recon Marines. That was it. They claimed 5 incidents, right, that around the FOB. Let's talk about that. There are 2 rockets that landed outside the perimeter. They didn't go off, right? The MU FOB OP observed two armed men outside, right, in the local dress, and we don't know who started shooting at each other, but they shot at each other, right? Come to find out, those 2 armed men were John Mahmoud Khan's outer perimeter security, right? So it's probably friendly fire if you want to call it that. But if anybody rates a combat action ribbon for returning and receiving fire, it's the OP, not the entire freaking FOB of 5 miles, right? There are 2 more rockets landed outside, incident number 3, outside the FOB perimeter. 1 detonated, and the other wasn't fused properly. Outside the perimeter, didn't even land inside. There's a KC-130, final approach, 2.5 miles out, receives fire. We don't know if it's celebrity fire. Boy being born, somebody getting married, they always shoot weapons in the air. You know that, okay? But they claim that. And maybe if it was enemy fire, the crew deserved air medals. I don't know. But the entire MU command element didn't deserve the car for that. And there's a patrol 10 kilometers away that got into a firefight. 10 kilometers away from the FOB, they deserve the car, not the entire MU FOB. And, so the guidance was, if you spend the night on the FOB, I shit you not. There's people coming up from Kandahar, hanging on to I'm embellishing here, onto the helicopters, come land on the ramp, sleep the night, sunrise, they fly back to Kandahar. We'll get our car.
I got to tell you, I spent a lot of time with Marines, and I know how hard it is, Marines. In fact, there was a study I remember reading, I think 2004, about how it was some study about distribution of awards. SEAL teams were terrible in the 90s. I mean, they didn't pass out anything. So our standard for getting awards was like probably the only thing close to it would have been the Marine Corps. But the Marine Corps was the stingiest of all services. And in my 30 odd years, I have never heard of a Marine unit getting a blanket car. I mean, I've never heard that. And you guys have the highest standard when it comes to like personal awards. And that
But the Marine
car,
Corps changed. You're talking about the old Marine Corps in the 1990s, and we can talk about that. The Marine Corps changed in the 1990s. It all became, instead of leadership, it became laddership. How can I get up that rung of ladder? If that combat action ribbon is going to make me look better in front of a promotion board, so be it. People are writing each other up for awards. Hey, buddy, you write me up for a Bronze Star, I'll write you up for one.
well, let me cut, we've hit most of everything I wanted to cover, and we're getting towards the end of, I wanted to make sure I hit most of the points of the book, but
Sure.
getting to what ended up happening, because I think largely it absolutely comes down to the clash. And I think the ironies of ironies, your MU commander put himself in for a Bronze Star, which is very atypical for a staff officer. I mean, I was in Baghdad for 2 years, and I watched 05s and 06s. If they did a 6-month stint briefing inside the embassy, they got a Bronze Star when they left, right? And I looked at it as, when I stood up the hostage working group, I was on active duty. I was there for 4 months in uniform. And Major General Sargent, the 2-star Air Force general who was running the J5, I built the organization from scratch, the hostage working group. I gave it its title. I wrote its mission statement, specified implied task, and I ran this organization. And as you can imagine, when you know 4 and you're telling the CIA, the FBI, and the State Department what to do, you create enemies because they're like, who the hell is this guy telling us? And all I'm doing is trying to coordinate and, oh, by the way, rescue people that were being kidnapped by Al-Qaeda and other groups. But I worked 120 kidnapping cases in the first 4 months I was there. And the Major General, when I'm headed back to Tampa, because I was the U.S. ambassador, Deputy Chief of Mission, James Jeffries, when he found out I was a reservist, he said, Dan, if you leave this thing you've started, the hospital, it falls apart. I need you to come back. And he found out I was taking headshots. And he literally said to me, and this is why I worked for him. He looked at me and he said, Dan, I know you're taking headshots from the FBI on-scene commander, who was the GS-15. I know there's some colonels, you pissed off some colonels. He goes, I will make you a GS-15. You can tell anyone below ambassador or general officer to go fuck off. And I said, yes, sir. I will come back and work for you. And I literally was 10 days from going home. And the Major General Sergeant told this Colonel Ahern, who was one of these West Point colonels, who was part of the Council of Colonels for the J5. I'm trying to pack my stuff up and put my office together. And the colonel goes, Dan, hey, the general wants to put you in for a Bronze Star, but he doesn't own you. You're not assigned to him, but we want to write you up. And I literally turned to him and I said, sir, I'm a reservist. I don't give a shit. I've got enough awards from being at SOCCENT the last 2 years. I'll make 05 at this point. I don't care about an award. And he goes, Dan, I was ordered by a 2-star general to write you up for an award. And, lo and behold, that got sent back to Tampa. General Axum put it into the Pentagon or Navy Awards as a Bronze Star. And it came back, 6 months later as an MSN. I didn't even see it for 2 years, right? I did not give a shit. And frankly, my culture, the SEAL team's kind of like, I know the Marine Corps, I didn't want to get a Bronze Star for being a staff officer. Like,
That's right.
Bullshit, right? And the same thing, combat action, SEALs, you have to be in a firefight. You cannot take incoming rounds because you're expected to take incoming rounds. If you're a SEAL or an infantry grunt, Army or Marine, you're expected to be taking mortars and rockets and suicide bombers at ECPs, which we all dealt with at a time. And, getting kind of down to to stand there and watch this guy put himself in for an award who did 8 hours out of that 6-month or 7-month deployment you guys did to put himself and get it to have the gall to get it in front of you in particular when he behind his back has already started this process to throw you under the bus after telling you to your face like a snake, oh, I'm putting you in for a Silver Star.
Through the pandemic, we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. Stores were shut down and doctors' offices were shut down. And even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
Divorce is tough, but your finances don't have to be. I'm David Cross, and I'm a certified divorce financial analyst practitioner. My job is to help you get a fair financial settlement in your divorce and to guide you to smarter money decisions. Find out how we can help you. U.S. Asset Management. It's your money and your future.
I mean, that is the you know, what's that book you referenced between the two officers, Massengale and
Sam
Kevin.
Damon.
Yeah.
Sam Damon.
I mean, that is what really, as I got towards the end of your book, I just sat there because I know what it's like to build enemies. You know, my enemies were in the interagency. It was mainly the FBI, but that's another topic, another time. But about organizations that take credit for the work you're doing when you're the one risking putting your life on the line. You know, I'm like you, brother. I did 22 months in that job in Baghdad, and I left without so much as a thank you. And I take it even 20 years later with a perverse sense of pride that it was the deed, not the glory. And that's why you get the job. And, you know, even these rumblings, you know, of you had the most kinetic, and let's talk about it, because it wasn't just Geraldo Rivera. The MEU was extending itself based on the work of the BLT. All the accolades that came to that MEU were 100% the BLT, and I'd say the Force Recon Platoon, who were doing obviously other work, and the air component for sure. But I'm curious, do you think it was the jealousy of the Fox News report that profiled you that might have been the start of that envy for him to actually, you know, pull that? Because he that Machiavellian work, and you were very clear about laying it out in the book. And that's where I'm just sitting there wondering what he obviously, you know, he realized he was the term they use when someone rises above to the level where they're not supposed to be. And the only way they can cut you down is to denigrate and take out that service. And I wonder what do you think was driving that, his decision to take one of the most successful MEUs in the early days of the war in Afghanistan. Besides Rhino, I don't think the Marines on a large scale had done anything close to what your battalion had done by 2004. You guys were the most kinetic deployment of any Marine element going back to 2001. Am I correct on that?
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, and we fought at 10,000 feet. So I mean, at altitude too. I mean, I don't think a Marine infantry battalion's fought at 10,000 feet, quite frankly.
Yeah.
You know? But I think, I mean, here's the bottom line, Dan. I don't begrudge him for getting that Bronze Star. I got no issue with it, right? And, that's not the issue. The issue is don't do it in front of the freaking Marines. Recognize the Marines first.
Absolutely.
Recognize them first. That's the whole issue. And if I would have just told the general, hey, just give me the thing and stuck it in my sea bag, right? Whatever. But the problem is this. I mean, you look at the pictures of these people, they got them on. They have no shame. They know damn well how they got that Bronze Star. They know damn well how they got that combat action ribbon, and they're wearing all their pictures and stuff. And it just every time I see this, and you know what? If you're an officer, forget the young Marines in the MEU command element. If you're an officer in that command element, you know damn well you didn't earn that combat action ribbon. Don't wear it. That's stolen valor. I mean, that's fraud because you got promoted as a result of those accolades that you didn't earn, and you got paid with that promotion. That's fraud. And these people should be held accountable. And that's what I'm talking about. And until we don't fix this award system in the entire U.S. military, we're going to continue having our young Marines, soldiers, and sailors lose confidence in their leadership because they see it in spades.
Well, but here's the mindset, Asad. The mindset, and I want to get back to this, we didn't talk about it, and I know it's the one thing. You took 1,200 Marines, and you had the most kinetic deployment in 4 years for any major infantry unit, and certainly Marine Corps. That, as I recall, I was in Afghanistan when you were, in Afghanistan. But I was tracking. We're all tracking what's going on between the theaters, and checkpoint 321 led to the one death on that deployment, and you knew that was not something that should have been set up.
Yeah, so it's a brigade envy syndrome. A MU is basically a reinforced battalion, right? Which is being supported by ACE, and they could have just stayed in. They didn't even need to come to Afghanistan, quite frankly. All they had to do was send the battalion, BLT, okay. And when I was leaving the U.S., I didn't want to bring the tanks because I knew I couldn't use them. I didn't want to bring the AVs, but we had to leave them on ship, and then you have to leave people behind to maintain them. So it's just stuff you didn't need, right? So you got a task organized for the mission at hand, but we didn't understand that stuff at the MU. And it's heresy if you talk about leaving stuff behind, because that's not how the Marine Corps does it, right? It's stupid in my mind. Nonetheless, so we get to Afghanistan, and we've got LAVs, right? And there's checkpoint 231, which is, there's two main routes. There's the northern route and there's the southern route. And this checkpoint is heads up to Tarankot, from Kandahar up to Tarankot. So there's a pass there, and there's a checkpoint there. And so they wanted to occupy that checkpoint, and they want to look like a brigade. So on the map at the CJTF level, they want to show multiple maneuver elements that the MU has, right? To show, hey, we've got 3 maneuver elements, which is all bullshit, because all they had was a freaking LAV platoon down there at 231. And I kept telling the MU CO, if you think of a triangle, checkpoint 231 is here, 60 kilometers Tarankot, 60 kilometers down, I'm here, and 60 kilometers across, basically, right? And I have to go across compartment because I'm the only force they have. If something happens to this platoon down there, I got to go across compartment, and it's going to take me 3 or 4 hours to get there, right? By then, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So I told him a stupid idea. Let me have John Mahmoud Khan put his militia down there for $5 a day. I can put 20 guys down there for $100 a day for $3,000 a month. The math is simple. This ain't rocket science. But the problem is, you can't put John Mahmoud Khan's icon down at 231. Right. So they want to show that LAR platoon down there.
But the MU commander wanted no interaction. I mean, and you discussed in the book, I don't know if it was John Muhammad, but one of the commanders, they were suspect of him, and they rolled up his father-in-law and uncle, I believe, on one of the commanders. So there was that distrust by the MU with the local Afghan fighters you were partnered with, which was another.
All of them. They didn't trust them. They didn't trust them at all. I mean, they used to use all sorts of derogatory terms that I don't want, raghead and all that stuff, and I don't want to go in there, and they'd say that shit in front of me, but it's fine, whatever, doesn't bother me.
Listen, I'm Irish, man. I wouldn't take an Irish insult if it was directed in jest. Yeah. Irish have a big sense of humor, and I get it. I'm short. I get the leprechaun joke. That shit doesn't bother me. But if it was a personal slight, like the N-word equivalent, and that's the N-word in your culture, I wouldn't tolerate that. And I know
I've heard, and to me, I got bigger fish to fry. That's the way I look at it, and being it's just different, right? Because skin color and stuff. So I'm just a different version of a minority. You know what I'm saying?
No, I get it. I mean,
this is just different. So what happened at 231 was, so we're going back and forth. That he just told me to mind my own business. That he's got it. So the Operation Rio Bravo starting out. I'm supposed to go out into these line of villages and clear them out. And they're supposed to show that, hey, they got another maneuver element. LAR is going to screen to our west, right? Screening force. So LAR goes to set up that night, and they get ambushed. And so we lost Corporal Payne, and 3 of the Marines and 1 corpsman, got hurt pretty bad. And so I get the word, I launch. My cat said, get over there. So they're hauling ass cross compartment. In the meantime, helos come in, pick up my battalion, and we surround the area. And, we heard that I don't know, that Mullah Omar was part of that group that ambushed them to protect them. That this was a diversion type thing. So we cleared that entire village. We spent 2-3 days there, and that's what happened. And it was just, it didn't need to happen for total cost at the end of the day of $3,000 a month. Think about that. All because we want to show a fucking graphic on a map to the higher headquarters that, hey, we're something bigger.
Well,
And so that's
it's reminiscent of Matterhorn, because I know you've read Matterhorn about
Mhm.
all the reports, right? The element in the field thinks I might have shot 2 guys. By the time it gets back to battalion, it's 7.
Right.
By the time I get back to brigade, it's 27. And the again, the self-looking ice cream cone and the bullshit. But it just, I want to go back to, you're wrapping up the deployment. You've obviously had conflict with your MIU boss the whole time. I still, as much as I know, when he owes his Bronze Star and he owes his future flag, he made flag off that deployment. Right? He made GO off of that MIU deployment.
I'll tell you now, McKenzie's is an interesting person. And I don't know, despite what happened, he let me do what I needed to do when I needed to do it. He gave me, a lot of allowances. And I never suspected that, with the McKenzie, because I'm very trusting, right? Hey, he's my boss. I serve him. I'll do my best. And I did. But I didn't know all the shit that was going on in the background. So I think what happened was McKenzie is very polished. You've heard him speak.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes all the way back to, where I think he went to Citadel. And he's got a reputation in the Marine Corps as a very smart individual, and, he's accomplished. So a lot of generals like him because he's a consummate staff officer. That's the way I can explain it, right? He can do some great paperwork, but he's not a field combat Marine leader, right? There's some people that when they go on hikes, they put pillows in their backpack, and some people carry the load, and he's probably of this other category, right? In my view. And, he's overweight, has a weight issue. So maybe there's a complex. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't want to figure him out. All I knew is he's my boss and I'll serve him well. And I served him with utmost loyalty and honor. I did. I wouldn't let anybody in the BLT badmouth him. I don't put up with that shit. And for 20 years, I kept quiet. For 20 freaking years, I kept my mouth shut. And I was lambasted in the military. I was lambasted that, they had all sorts of stories that I'd beat up Marines, I'd done this. And because I kept quiet, they said, yeah, you had to be guilty because of my silence. Right. But it was my professionalism because my Marines were going to Iraq and I didn't want them to lose confidence in their leadership. That's the main reason I didn't publish this book. And this damn book should have never been written. This thing should have never been written.
But the Jagman investigation into you, as I read, got dismissed. The grounds that you made the comment. If I grab my soldier inappropriately, well, then every general that's ever patted me on the back should be charged with assault. That got thrown out, and the conduct unbecoming got thrown out. So that's what I'm curious, and I maybe you don't know, but what would have spearheaded that investigation into you by the MIU commander?
So what happened was so when we're floating back to the U.S. On the WASP, he calls me in one day. He said, hey, have you seen this video? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So he plays this video, and it's SBS Dateline from Australia. And the MIU always wanted these reporters coming, right? Because they wanted, because all the tensions in Iraq, they want to get some attention. And so this lady tapes one of the officers. Again, the Marines have been extended. So the officer's telling them, hey, pay attention. They're going on patrol. And he said, do you understand me? Do you understand me? Marine doesn't respond. So he pushes him, right? They got on tape, use some foul language. And so when this hits the news, the Marine Corps goes in damage control. And this lady made allegations that there were prisoners abused, right? And what she said was true, but it wasn't. None of the allegations were involved in BLT. It was all the MIU command element because they had a detainee handling facility. And when the prisoners were brought in, or the detainees, they were stripped. The doctor would look at them to make sure they weren't, bruises and all that stuff. And
or lice culture, or anything else.
So the Afghan culture, that's viewed as, sexual assault, I guess, to strip somebody naked. So the Afghans, but it could have been very easily explained, right? But Abu Ghraib had just happened. So while we're floating back, everybody wants to know what the hell's going on with 22 MIU, right? And what's this officer shoving somebody? So I think McKenzie, to save his own ass, basically said, hey, that's Khan's command climate. But here's the kicker. I kept my mouth shut about that. And there's a video on YouTube with my name on it. Everybody thinks that's me shoving that Marine. It's not. It's one of my officers, right? But let me clarify that. And I never mentioned his name for 20 years because I don't throw people under the bus, okay? And this officer happened to be working for the MU at that time, guarding their fob. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't even around. He wasn't with me for 3 months, you know? But McKenzie turned around and said, it was my command climate. Oh, shit, I'm in the mountains, man. He's working for you, directly for you, guarding your damn fob. And you don't have the moral courage and the self-accountability to say, you know what, I'm responsible. You blame it on me. Fine. I don't give a shit. Whatever, you know? So they do that. So then, you know, the MEF CG wants to relieve him. And I knew the MEF commander. I was ranked like one of the top lieutenant colonels in the MEF by the MEF CG. So I was like, you know, I'll get back to the U.S. I'll talk to the MEF CG. Everything will be all right. Little did I know the MEF CG got changed to this guy, Amos, who later on, you know, got caught allegedly for lying, claimed that he went to the basic school, never did. Then they said, well, he took the non-resident course, you know. So he never attended. This guy never went to Marine boot camp. He never went to the basic school. You know, he never went to OCS. He basically walked into PX, picked up Eagle Globes and Anchors, put it on there, and ultimately becomes a commander on the damn Marine Corps. And then
I know the damage. You know, all my Marine friends, buddies are. Amos is not high on anyone's mark as a commandant,
yeah, and I mean, but the point being is, this guy is want to prove to everybody what a tough guy he is, you know. And in my mind, you know, he's nothing more than a freaking weasel, you know. I mean, that's the way I look at him, right? And I got no problem saying it. I'll say it to his damn face, right? And so he wants to show how tough he is because that pissing thing was also happening, if you remember, the scout snipers, which he got hammered for later on for undue, unlawful command influence by the court, if you remember that, right? So this is the type of people we're dealing with. These guys are scumbags, I'm telling you. Okay, so
CYA leadership. Cover your.
They just want to show that they're tough. They want to show how tough I am. You haven't done shit, man. You want to be tough? Come in those mountains with me and fight. That's what tough is. You know, sitting here and throwing people under the bus is not tough. That's cowardly, in my opinion. And in my view, anybody that stands on the yellow footprints and takes an oath to join our military is a freaking hero. And we shouldn't eat our own. That's the first part. Anyway, so they want to relieve this guy. I said, you know, they want to do an investigation. I said, fine, you know, we'll do an investigation. Not a single Marine under him, because by then he'd come back to the BLT. Said that they felt it was assault. It was just a coach saying, hey, wake up. Nonetheless, they want to relieve him. I said, you know what? I'm not relieving him. You want to relieve him? You can relieve him, you know, and all that happy shit. So they take this captain who's a really freaking great guy, and he gets relieved. So 2-3 days later, he comes back as well. Now the MFCG said, we need to do a command investigation on you. I'm saying, for what? I said, I'll tell you right now, command climate sucks. We just came out of combat. We lost 20, 30 pounds. I'm telling you right now, you know. So anyway, so he said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. You know, whatever. And by then, I'd even stopped going to staff meetings because I'd send my ops or my XO, you know. So multiple investigations happened, right? So the final command climate investigation was done by a junior officer, a brand new officer they brought in, who's going to be the MU XO, junior to me. He did the command climate investigation, aviator, has no freaking clue about what goes on in infantry battalion. He does investigation, and it takes fabricated statements. In the back of the book, there's a statement by the MU adjutant. If it's my command climate investigation, why are you going to the MU adjutant to get a statement? It should be everybody in the BLT, right? So they took like 70 statements out of 1,199 Marines, 70 statements. That's all they took. They may have taken more. They probably didn't include them because they're probably favorable, right? And so all those statements I hear say, I heard that Khan did this from this guy. I heard. There's nothing, hey, I saw him do this. Okay. So the Serrano, this Adj says that she heard that I smacked the lieutenant so hard that his head bounced off his shoulder. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I go to the lieutenant's statement. The lieutenant says he never hit me. So why wasn't she charged for filing a false statement? Now, while all this is going on, I have no clue, right? This is later on I find all this out. So we get back to the States, and I get called in. I'm going to relieve you. I said, fine, great. You know, anything else? Then he said, you're not going to do anything, suicidal or anything. And I looked at him. I said, you fat little shit. I said, how dare you speak to me like that? How dare you? After all I've been through, you think I'm going to do that? You know? And I said, fuck off. And I turned around and walked off. I was pissed, right? And I had every right to. And, then basically the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and here's the kicker. You want to hear something really good? At the same time, exact same time, 2-1 in Iraq, right, fires a mortar round on their own troops, which the battalion commander approved, the fire mission. And it so happened was Duncan Hunter, the congressman, right, was the one that plotted the grid. And it landed right on top of the company, like a dozen Marines wounded, 3 killed. The regimental commander said that all 3 of them should be relieved. Battalion commander, FDC, and this lieutenant, right? Mattis disagreed with the regimental commander. The Marine Corps covered it up for 3 freaking years until Mary Tillman, Pat Tillman's mother, found out about it, and Congress called in the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps and said, come explain this to us. And he apologized. We lied to our Marines, and we covered it up. Anyway, so he gets capped. He retires as a 3-star general. All these allegations and shit. Now, I don't know what the hell because I haven't seen the investigation. Because when you get relieved, it's an administrative relief. You're not allowed to see any evidence against you. It's administrative. He doesn't like you. He doesn't like, you got BO, whatever the reason he comes up with, right? And hopefully the next higher ranking, the MEF commander, would adjudicate that. The MEF commander never called me in. He never called me in and said, hey, what the hell's going on here? He just let the lawyers handle it. So the lawyers throw all these charges based on hearsay. Okay, assault was one, and the other is conduct on becoming an officer. So I go in front of the JAGs and all that stuff for the hearing. And what first charge? Assault. What did I do? Well, you grabbed the Marine flak jacket. I did. It was in combat under fire. I did do that. Yes. Okay. But if you're going to charge me with that, we need to bring down all these general officers that smacked me in the back and stuff, and they should be also charged for assault. And they kind of look around. They go, yeah, you got a point. Dropped. Next charge. Conduct unbecoming officer. What's the specification? Well, use foul language. I said, just like this, because they all knew me. I had a reputation at Camp Lejeune. I said, fucking A, I did. Right? But I've heard the FCG also use foul language, and the MU commander also. The only officer I haven't heard use foul language my entire time in the Marine Corps is T.S. Jones, because he would substitute the F word for flipping. Right?
Right.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So they look at that, they're like, get out of here. But the mistake these clowns made, Dan, the mistake they made by charging me was I was entitled to get the investigation, right? Because I have to see the evidence. I'm under the UCMJ. So I open it up, I read like the first few pages, brilliantly written by McKenzie. Brilliant work, right? I look at it, I was like, screw this. I literally put it away, right? I didn't even read the whole damn thing. Fast forward, right? I didn't read it. Put it away. I didn't care. I'm retired. I'm out of here. But they wouldn't even let me retire because they knew as soon as I got out of the gates, I can run my mouth. So they started another freaking investigation. Finally, I said, screw this shit. So I went and got a lawyer, right? And Charlie Gittins, good man. And he said, yeah, Colonel. He goes, I was waiting for a phone call from you. Tell me your side of the story. I did. He said, you willing to go in 60 minutes? I said, absolutely. She said, I'll call you back. He called the Commandant's SJA. He said, yeah, I got this war hero, Silver Star, and he's talking about, this combat action ribbon and some other stuff that went on the deployment. When do you guys want to go in 60 minutes? 8 hours later, I got my walking papers. 8 hours later, the Marine Corps didn't want to deal with it. Okay? The Commandant of the Marine Corps knew all this shit was going on. He didn't have the balls, Hagee, to step in and see equitable justice. 2-1 battalion commander, got away with it by killing Marines and wounding Marines and sailors. And one guy that actually, I did my duty. I'm not claiming anything. I did my duty. And, and that's the way you treat me. That's fine. I don't really care because these people, they're lesser people than I am. I don't really care. But the whole crux of this is I kept my mouth shut professionally for 20 freaking years. I had movie offers. I had book offers. I had all sorts of offers. And when the Kabul withdrawal happened, it was a freaking gut punch. And the reason it was a gut punch was the same guy who was my MU commander was a CENTCOM commander. And we fucked it up. And we got young kids killed. So that's when I said, you know what? I didn't have social media presence. I said, I'm going to go out and start talking about it. So I went on LinkedIn. I started leaving messages. And people are like, who the hell are you? We've never heard of you. You're a freaking stolen valor. I said, hey, I'm not a Navy SEAL. I'm not wearing a trident. But then all the Marines jumped in. Guys like CJ and all those guys said, hey, this guy's legit. You don't know what you're talking about. So then somebody asked me, one of my Marines said, hey, sir, start a YouTube channel. I started a YouTube channel. It took off, And so then on the YouTube channel, somebody said, hey, sir, why don't you write a book? I said, I wrote one. And so happened in 2005, I wrote the transcript, right? I wrote this whole thing and I put it away because I wanted to get it off my chest. And I just kept quiet about it, right? And then I went to then when I wanted to publish it, the publishers want to see receipts. They say, yeah, great story. Show us the backup. Right? I can't find the investigation. I've moved so many times all over the world, traveled. I can't find it. So I'm like, you know what? The story's never going to get written. One day, I'm snooping around this closet. I pull up this helmet bag.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And it's heavy. I'm like, shit, something's in there. Maybe I open up, there's an investigation. Now, I don't know if that's the good Lord looking down or whatever. So I was like, I got the receipts now. The book's going to be published. And that's how the book came out. Now, everything is backed up. I got everything, every word that I've said is documented, and it's there. So I challenge anybody to say anything different. Anybody. What happened, and this is not about me. This is about the institution. It's a difference between leadership and laddership. And I'll never claim to be a good leader. I just did my damn duty. But the problem in the military right now is because we've got this culture of officers that we've grown since the 1990s when this book generation came up, that every officer had to have a collection of libraries. If you have 3,000 books in your library, you're a smart guy. Well, that's great to be smart, but you got to get out there and apply that smart with your Marines and train with them. And that's the difference. So we've got this whole generation of officers that are really sharp guys. They're good guys, and somebody that I want my sister to marry, right? They're that type of guys. But at the end of the day, you don't want them in combat because they don't know what to do. They just don't. They haven't trained. They haven't done night attacks. They haven't stayed out in the field for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. They haven't bonded with their Marines, so the Marines trust each other. And that's what it takes to do. And I don't claim to be a great I did my freaking duty, man. That's all I did, to the best of my ability. I don't claim anything. Trust me. And this damn book should have never been written. This should have not been written. And I'll tell you why it shouldn't have been written. Because when I was a young lieutenant, there's a guy by the name of David Hackworth that wrote this book. And this book was my Bible. About Face was my Bible because it talked about all the same damn problems in Vietnam, and he got drummed out of the Army, right? And everybody tells me that this book reminds, Once an Eagle. And I'll tell you what, Once an Eagle is freaking fiction. Betrayal of Command is not fiction. I lived it. Now, I don't know if I'm Sam Damon or Courtney Massengill. I'll let the leaders decide that shit, right? But I'm still passionate about it, and it's an obsession with me. The obsession is leadership. Do your damn duty. Don't bitch, moan, and complain. Just do your damn job, what you get paid for. That's it. And all these guys walk around with all this stuff, and I'll tell you this much: you want to talk about the Kabul withdrawal? Let's talk about that. That was a freaking disaster. A lance corporal could have done better. A lance corporal could have planned it better. And I'll tell you, there's lance corporals in 1/6 that could have planned that withdrawal better. It wasn't rocket science. We shouldn't have never given up Bagram, and it should have been conditions based. Will you do X? We'll do Y. Right? And it never happened. Right? And everybody now, it's been 4.5 freaking years. 4.5 years, Dan. Right? Now think about this. In World War II, in 4 years, we mobilized the country. We deployed to the European theater and the Pacific theater. We defeated the Germans and the Japanese in 4 years. It's been 4.5 years, and we haven't gotten the investigation out to hold people accountable. And everybody's finger pointing to Biden. Biden doesn't know a freaking difference between an A-10 or an AV-8B. He's clueless about that, nor should he. He's the president. And whatever his advisors are going to tell him, he's going to take their recommendations. And guess what? McKenzie wrote that book, Melting Pot. And if you read that book, he gave 4 options to the president, right? And you know how that works. CENTCOM comes up with the options, goes to, the Joint Staff, to the SecDef, and they all go and brief it to the president, right? The 4 options were maintain a 2,500 U.S. force with special operations capability, and retain Bagram, right? And retain Bagram. Reduce to 1,800 U.S. forces holding 3 bases, including Bagram. Number 3, option 3 was complete military withdrawal, maintaining embassy presence. Option number 4 was complete pullout with no diplomatic presence. You've done planning, I've done planning. You never give a bad option because the danger is he may pick it. And guess what Biden did? He picked option 4.
Well, let me say this. General Scotty Miller, who was the longest serving 4-star.
Yep.
And I don't know that I've met him. He was the IATF commander when I was at CENTCOM, and he was the IATF commander at SOCOM when he just pinned on 1 star. I have a lot of SF buddies that know him, worked with him. And he was given the option between McKenzie and Miller about what are we going to do? And Miller, they all came out and they all admit it. If we don't leave at least that 2,500 stay behind at force at Bagram, Afghanistan will fall. If we had left that soft component, the element, and the air component, and the maintenance support, they could have kept the Taliban at bay.
Yes.
And when
Yes.
that option, that fourth option you're talking about, was offered, Miller was like, I'm not going to get behind it. And that's why he was quietly retired. He walked with his honor. But Miller,
he's a man of honor.
A man of honor.
He's a man of honor. Yeah, that's
no
what
one
he
will
is.
say the same. Our generation of veterans, OAF and OIF, none of us will say the same about Milley or McKenzie because of how it all played out. And the worst, most disgusting.
I did an episode, on my channel, Sentinel 360, one word, right, on YouTube. I talk about this shit all the time. Not this. I talk about military geopolitics and all that stuff. Okay, in that I did an episode, and I've got the receipts, right, where McKenzie was ordered by Milley to go forward to Qatar, right, and to sit in the negotiations with the Taliban. They ordered him because he didn't want to go. Right? August 26th, he was sitting in Tampa. Now, you've been planning this operation for a year and a half. Don't you want to be at the point of friction, failure, and transition as a commander? You probably need to be there. But he wanted to keep plausible distance, that he was sitting at Tampa, right? And that's how they play this shit.
Well, but it goes back to him as a colonel sitting on the FOB the entire deployment except for 8 flipping hours. I'm going to quote Major General Jones on your behalf because I'm not going to drop an F-bomb on the podcast. But think about it. That's the culture and that's the crux of this interview. I pulled it out of you because I knew your passion was going to I didn't have to even guide you to where I wanted you to talk about this, but it is that we either build a warrior culture and a warrior ethos all the way from E1, O1 up to E9 and O9, or we don't. And I was about to pull off About Face because I have my About Face copy is right behind me on the
there you go. God bless
cabinet.
You.
And I read that book as a young officer. I was in the SEAL teams. I read that book when that came out, and everyone talked about this is the generational. Everyone described, and I'm telling you right now, Genghis, I'm glad you've come out. I'm glad you've shared your truth, and you've got the receipts. So this is no bullshit, and there will be no stolen valor. The way CJ talked, I called CJ late night. I'm trying to finish the book and write the notes, and then CJ talked my ear off about what a mentor you've been to him. He said you got screwed, and he said it didn't change his leadership calculus about how he was still mentoring Marines even after what happened to you. That is at the core here. It is, your passion has come out, and I'm glad we're getting this story out. But again, that mindset for that new commander, Colonel McKenzie, is the same mindset that led to the disasters. And those generals, I'll say this. I've done a lot of media. I've done media back for, a long time. I was trying to get back on orders, and I decided that I'm not going to go do any interviews. I'm not going to do anything. And I remember watching the testimony from Milley and McKenzie on the Hill after the fallout, and they all would point the blame at, it was the State Department was in charge. I was so incensed, and I will share this article with you, and I wrote it on Armed Forces Press. It was "Leave no man behind." Is a promise, not a tagline, right? It's a promise when a guy like you gives it, when someone like me makes it. My SEAL brethren, the legacy I came through in Buds is that we've never left a man behind on the field of battle. And we live and die by that. I started the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim back 17 years ago, raising money for a wounded SEAL stepped on a landmine in Afghanistan, Dan Kanasan. And we had on the back of that T-shirt, "Leave no man behind." These are not taglines. This isn't something out of a movie with Colonel Jessup saying these are punchlines of these people. This is truly how the warrior culture is, and it has to be, because if we don't have that bond from leadership, and I truly have the whole time as I'm reading this book going, why would they instigate this case against you? Your leadership of the BLT 6-1 is what set the tone. You walked out. Everyone was offering you, you're going to be Peter Pace's aide. Any other light colonel in the Marine Corps would have been like, I become the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff's aide. Oh, I'm not making colonel. I'm making one, probably 2-star. Any other Marine parfum prince and probably some maybe warrior inclined would have gone, oh, this is going to be good for my career. And you turned down the opportunity to be a flag aide when you got back from Afghanistan to another general. Was it someone offered to you at CENTCOM when you came back? So you have always been about the mission. You've always been about your men. You've always been about your Marines, and it clearly comes out. And I feel your passion. I'm literally going to promote this book. I just finished the last of it last night, and even more inspired by Genghis. And you have lived up to the name Genghis Khan on levels. And I think and Khan is leader in Pashtun culture as well, as a tribal leader. And you're going to build a tribe about this. And I understand the book just came out on the Marine Corps birthday just last fall.
Yep.
And I'll say this tongue in cheek, it should end up on a future commandant's reading list. And I hope it
Never will. Never will. I've already had general officers contact me and ask me, what the hell am I doing? Because you don't talk outside the the Marine Corps, especially the Marine Corps, and I have no problem, because it's all about honor, right? At the end of the day, honor, courage, and commitment. That's what it's about. And I live by those words. And unfortunately, what's happened is you can't, and you're talking about this warrior culture. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. It's only one way. And that's that warrior culture that we used to have, and that everybody committed to after Vietnam, because they saw the screw ups in Vietnam. And the people that stayed in the military made that commitment. The Jay Vargas, the Ripleys, the Wesley Fox, Wild Bill Samoan. I mean, the list is endless. General Zinni, Van Riper. I mean, I can go on for days. They committed to us to make the Marine Corps better. And then all of a sudden, 1990s, we just took a right turn. And trust me, and what's happened is that the damage that Amos has done, and a couple other commandants, and I don't want to go into all that, but how that works is the commandant sets the precept for the promotion boards, and he'll say, these are the type of people I want selected to general officers. So they handpick these people, and then his legacy stays on for the next 12 years.
Yeah.
Right? Well, colonel until he becomes a 3-4 star. So Amos has still got tentacles in the Marine Corps. And that's how the system works. Until we break this cycle, we're gonna have a cultural problem. And trust me, this is not about McKenzie. This ain't about Khan. This has got nothing to do with it. I like the guy. He ain't a bad dude. Okay. It just so happened that we shouldn't have been put together. And a lot of people said the reason we were put together was because of my knowledge of Afghanistan and my background. They wanted McKenzie to succeed. So I was just a throwaway, round. And that's fine. I got no issue with it. If it helps the Marine Corps, so be it. Not a problem. But my point is this is about the institution. And it's not just about the Marine Corps. It's about the military as a whole. I was just reading there's a 3-star that just got busted down to 2-star and was retired in Europe. He went to Ukraine or something, and this idiot left behind classified documents on a train, or the staff did. And then he got so freaking drunk next morning that he banged his head and he couldn't even. I mean, you got to be shit. You should be busted down to a freaking private. And until we start making examples out of these people, this culture will continue to grow and grow, and it'll outspace the warrior culture. And now everybody talks about warriors, right? We talk about Navy SEALs. We talk about special forces. We talk about all these special mission units, and we talk about the Rangers. They're warriors. But how come the whole military isn't like that? The Marine Corps used to be like you guys are. And nobody's done a study on that. After Operation Eagle Claw, what happened to the Marine Corps? Because we failed to perform. That's what happened. And then all these other, special forces units started getting stood up, and the SEALs basically took away the Marine Corps' mission. If you think about it, all the missions that we had, the amphibious missions that we had, you guys were there doing all the beach reconnaissance and stuff, but you've taken away all the other missions from the Marine Corps. Now, even the embassy evacuations, the Marine Corps can't even get there from here. Why not? Nobody's asking that question, because we're focused on the wrong freaking things. We've forgotten our bread and butter, and that's so damn sad. And I see that, and it just boggles my mind, some of the shit that's going on in the Marine Corps. And but there's a silver lining. There's a lot of young officers that are coming up in the Marine Corps, and they're pretty damn hard, and they're focused on war fighting. And we just got to let them grow. We got to let them nourish. We got to let them blossom. And when they do, I guarantee you this train is going to turn. And that's what I'm keeping my faith in.
Well, I can speak. I've got my last classmate, not only from my BUDS class, but my Naval Academy class. Admiral Bradley now is running SOCOM. I can't think of a finer individual, and I know there's some serious talent. I live in Tampa, so I get interface with some pretty impressive leadership within the SOC community. Marines, now Raiders are certainly a part of it. In fact, Donovan just took over Southcom. All right,
Good guy.
Yeah,
Awesome.
His brother was who's also an admiral, SEAL. Tom Donovan was an ensign at Team 3, and so I'm old like you. I'm an old gray beard and getting grayer by the day. But your book's going to be an important legacy, and I'm glad it came out. I'm glad we have a chance to promote it, and you are going to be your Marine Corps' generational David Hackworth, and I say that with no sense of irony. I think it's the perfect analogy. And about face, next at Betrayal Command will be on maybe not the commandant's reading list, but certainly up and coming Marine infantry officer reading list for the future.
I appreciate that, but let me tell you something. I don't take any pride in being the next David Hackworth. This book should have not been written. And let me tell you something. The next Betrayal Command, the 3.0, because this is 2.0 to Hackworth, so everybody says, and the 3.0 should never be written. I hope it never does, because we've learned the lessons and we've adjusted the institution, the organizations, and some of the things that Pete Hegseth is doing. Let me tell you something. When Pete Hegseth on 30 September stood in front of 800 generals and senior enlisted and said the Shirellis, the McKenzies, and the Millies are out, I literally flipped over on this chair that he said that, right? In front of your entire tribe, you just got pushed out, right? Because people are recognizing that. There's a lot of things that Hegseth does I don't agree with. There's a lot of things that he's doing that I agree with. Now, how embarrassing it is as a general officer sitting in that audience and Hegseth tells you, get in shape, fat, not fit. Think about that.
Yeah.
I would do Harry Carey. I would literally just, that's your job, man. You're a general officer. Get out there and lead. How many general officers are out there doing PT? That's why I love Hegseth doing PT. It's not his job to go in PT with the troops, but if he's out there, the generals are going to be out there, right?
Yeah. Well, listen, there's a lot of, you can say a lot of things about Hegseth in terms of his, level of experience to command the War Department, if you will now. But his messaging has been spot on. And I'll tell you, last year's SOF week here in Tampa, it's the largest convention, 30,000 people came in. And I've been going to it on and off when I wasn't deployed for the last 20 years. I mean, I've literally been to the last 15 odd SOF weeks here in Tampa. And when Hegseth came and spoke, the auditorium was packed within, an hour before the lecture. They had to do overflow, and it was everyone took a pause and listened to his entire lecture. And the next 3 days, that's all anyone talked about. And the SOF community was like, SecDef, Secretary of War, he is putting out the right message, because when we pulled out of Afghanistan, I put together a presentation and I basically said, Pax Romana, Roman peace, Pax Britannica, and I wrote, Pax Americana. I said, I thought we ended. I thought historians were going to write that the era of Pax Americana was going to end August of 2021, the way we exited Afghanistan. And, on another podcast, we'll talk about the current war. I was going to ask you as the last question, but I think we capped
that's
up
another
enough.
2 hours. I could go on all day. But here's the deal. With your audience, and with your credentials, you need to really force the issue of the Afghanistan withdrawal investigation. I think that is so damn important, because the only person that was held accountable was Stu Schiller. That's the only person. The rest of them got away with it, and right or wrong, whatever Stu did, but he's just calling for accountability. And we owe it to the 13 service members' families, so they get the answer what the hell happened. We owe it to the 40 wounded. And when McKenzie and Milley were in that congressional hearing, and the congressman asked them to turn around and talk to Sergeant Vargas Andrews, McKenzie didn't do that. And he said, no, I don't want to turn around. And if I was and here's the difference. I would have said, you know what? I'm sorry. I apologize. I screwed up. That's what men of honor do. We will all make mistakes. You've made them. I've made them. We all do. But we recognize our mistakes and we hold ourselves accountable. But you can't have your nose so far up that you don't you're not going to turn around and talk to a sergeant, and there's evidently, I can go on about this all the way, and I don't want to end on a negative note, but I really, really think that this ship is turning around, and we got a bright future ahead of us if we keep paying attention to leadership. All the technology, whiz bang stuff that we got is great, but at the end of the day, it's all about people and the decision makers and the responsibility they have and the accountability that they need to have to hold themselves to a higher standard. That's what it's all about, in my view.
Well, listen, Genghis, we could go for another hour easy. Let's wrap this up. This has been, a very powerful. I don't even know what the timeline is now, but I'm going to get this edited and sent out on Armed Forces Press this week, and I'll share the link with you. And I will take that to note about the investigation. I understand Stu Schoer, I believe, is on the investigation at the Pentagon or War Department or ASD SOG, something to that effect. So, my counterparts in the DC area, I'll get him to try and set up an interview and maybe get him on. If you have context with Stu, maybe we'll get him on the show.
Sure. Yeah.
Have his share
I
perspective.
will. Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. And Stu said it'll be out in February. Pete Exit said it'll be out in March. Unfortunately, I think because of what's going on in Iran, people are obviously focused on that, but we still need accountability at the end of the day. We can do multiple things. We're capable of doing multiple things, and the investigation needs to come out and people need to be accountable. I'm certainly not advocating any type of witch hunt, but we got to get to the facts. That's what the people we owe to the families. And I think it's so damn important that we do that. And as a nation, it's going to bring us together, because right now what happens is if you don't have transparency, you don't have the truth, then all these conspiracy theories start, right? And then people get divided along political lines, ideological lines, and whatnot. So it's important to be transparent. It's important to be truthful. And that's what men of honor do. And we are men of honor. We're a nation of honor. I always have, multiple copies of our Constitution that I keep, and I travel with it because I believe in this document, and I believe in our constitutional values. 100%. Life, liberty, justice, equality, human dignity, rule of law. Those are all important attributes that our Constitution have, and all of those values are enshrined in all the international protocols. You look at the UN Charter, you look at all the various Geneva Conventions and stuff. It was our Constitution that was spread across them, and we have a higher responsibility as a nation. We have a higher responsibility as military officers to our sons and daughters. And, I just want everybody to understand that being an officer, being a staff NCO, being an NCO is an incredible responsibility, because people underneath you trust you with their lives. With their lives, they're trusting you. And it's not something that you shy away from. It's not something you take lightly, and as I said before, and it probably, I talk quickly, so you probably missed it. But if you're a Marine officer, if you're a combat officer, if you're a military officer, and if you're not willing to die with your Marines, and if you're not willing to sacrifice your career, you don't belong in that freaking uniforms, because your Marines are willing to do the same for you. That's what it's all about.
Couldn't have said it better. You do really encompass the deed is all, not the glory. And listen, I'm excited to help get this book promoted. We will put it out on our website, and we're gonna probably do a book review. And I got something I'm going to talk to you offline. I'm going to end the recording, and I've got something about something I think I can help you with book promotion. But we'll do that as soon as I stop the recording. So give me a second. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye, brother. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Have a beautiful Eid, and Salam alaikum, my friend.